is live. Come on. Oh, excuse me. He's got the virus. No. Well, blimey, there's people here already. You snuck in, didn't you? Good evening, Lisa and Sasquatch. You've just interrupted me watching a chap rebuilding a 1967 GM automatic gearbox. I'm grateful. You're welcome. Yeah, not my cup of tea. I like my cars, but I'm not a massive gearhead. Excuse me. Right. Well, I hope you're all well and coping in these difficult times. I keep sort of seeing just things seem to be getting a little bit closer to home. Do you know what I mean? I noticed an old school friend today. Her mother passed away today. Now I don't know whether that was related to issues going on in the big wide world, but obviously being elderly, you kind of think maybe. Yes, so it kind of feels a little bit odd, I guess. But, nevertheless, we shall prevail. Oh, I love effects. Right. I'll try to make that tea last, but I'm quite thirsty. And, by the way, if you notice me just kind of little clearing of the throat business, don't worry, it's not a persistent new cough. I certainly don't have a fever. The more I think about it and talk about it, the more I want to do it. It's kind of a nervous thing, I guess. But I have this issue. I don't want to go into all the gory details. But I've had it now for about... it must be coming up for 2 months now. And it's just this kind of... It's like a post-nasal drip thing. Because I suffer from sleep apnea, so it kind of irritates the lining of the nose sometimes. Sometimes it's worse than others, and I've had a particularly bad irritation for the last couple of months, which results in just kind of stuff trickling down the back of my throat and then getting caught. And but it's getting better, very slowly. It's getting better. I've got a spray, so that's good. Anyway, enough of my minor medical issues. There's obviously lots of people with many more that's going on. Anyway, so I thought what with us all being kind of stuck indoors and being a little bit bored, that I might just come in here and gather some friends around the 21st century fire that we call YouTube, and just have a bit of a natter as we do through. It's kind of a one-way thing, isn't it? You just hear me, but I just thought maybe I often get asked questions about things to do with the Fairlight, things to do with the Yamaha stuff that I've been doing a lot of stuff with just lately, and so I thought, yeah, why not? We come in here, and if you want to ask me anything, I'm more than willing to attempt to answer. I haven't got anything kind of set up for demonstration, unfortunately. Certainly not as far as the Fairlight is concerned, because it's working. It's just it requires some fudging to get kind of going, and then you can't really see what's going on. And at the moment, I can't share the video output, although it's something I have been considering. Yeah, so if you want to ask me about anything that I'm doing with Fairlights in terms of restoration or history or seminars and so on, and shows, although most of those look like they're probably going to be cancelled, then by all means do. If you want to ask me anything about Yamaha and the whole FM thing, which is something I've been trying to work on this year. It's slow progress, what with everything that's going on, but yeah, by all means, if you want to ask me, I actually got these. Was it yesterday or I can't remember, the day before? These are. Let me just make sure that you can see these. There we go. They look happy, don't they? I mean, once somebody says, "Oh, look, they're smiling," you can't unsee it. It's great. So these are made by a guy called Stefano, who's from Milan. So he's a fellow Northern Italian. And Stefano makes these cartridges, and they are physically identical to the original DX cartridge, the first iteration of the Dx Rom cart. So physically they're identical, but internally they are far from it, because these contain 32 banks of sound. So you have 16 cartridges times 2, or should I say 6? It's kind of difficult to explain because Yamaha were never consistent. So the original Yamaha cartridges, the ROM cartridges. So these things. Let me just go and grab some. Let's see, my headphones go this far. So, these are original Dx7 Rom cartridges. Okay, so they're these little black things, and they both have this little AB switch on them. So you can have 32 sounds in bank A, and another 32 sounds in bank B. And that's what you have, say, for example, on this cartridge. So you've got orchestral and percussive and synth complex and effects. This one is the number 1 cartridge. It's a master group, which is the sounds that ship internally, and some extra keyboard and plucked sounds. And Yamaha, released a whole load of these, and many third parties did the same. But that was it. These were presets. You can't wipe them. You can't rewrite them. So Yamaha then came out with this. You have to excuse the graffiti on the front there. That was our friend David Knowles, who previously owned the DX5 that I have. So this is a RAM cartridge. Now this RAM cartridge, the switch doesn't select between different banks. It's actually just a write protect switch. and it's recessed, so it's kind of difficult to get to. But you have space here for 32 of your Dx7 patches. So this is where you can write stuff and then stick it on here. Look at this, it even comes even in its original box. Look at that. How many years old is that? So then after a while, third-party manufacturers started getting wise to this, and you had companies like Digital Music Corporation. Again, these are a little bit faded because these are quite old and original. These are Dx Rom carts, and these actually have 64 voices. So these have the same capacity as the original ROM carts, but they're writable or rewritable. Interesting story. I bought these from Canada, and the guy said, "Oh yes, I've had them working with my Dx7, absolutely fine." And he sends them over, and they do work, except they're locked. And Yamaha, in their infinite wisdom, put a feature in the very first iterations of the Dx7, and that iteration provided a facility where you could lock these with just a very simple code number. I think it's a single digit. The only reason I can say I think it is because I've not got an original Mark 1 Dx7. And the only person I know who has got one is a gentleman called David Vorhaus, who has said, "Oh yeah, come over and we'll try them and see if we can unlock them, so I can get access to, some RAM space." Because I thought, that it'd be quite a handy thing to have. And anyway, so those are kind of defunct at the moment. Here's a rare one. This is the Dx5 and Dx1 performance ROM cart. So this has all the performance patches. And performances on a Dx5 and the Dx1 is where you take Bank A and Bank B, which is the internal engines, which are basically two Dx7s. And the performance then says, well, how do you want to mix these two engines together? Do you want to, all the modulation settings and what have you? So they're performance patches. So that took me a while to find that one. So along comes this guy, and he produces these cartridges, and they contain 16 cartridges, each containing 64 sounds. So 32 in level 1, which you can see is just that little switch just here, and another 32 in level 2. So you use that combination of this little rotary, which you can hear, and it's really nicely made. It's not flimsy, it's very solid. So you have 64 patches times 16 banks. So that's 1,024 patches on just one of these. And of course, with the Dx5 over there, you have 2 slots, so that's 2,048 patches. Or, as you really want to try and do, is you have 2 sets of sounds on these that work together and create your layers. So it gives you lots of room for putting stuff on. You can have a huge amount of fun. So they only came in the other day, and they're going to be reviewed. I'll be doing that on the website soon. And there are some other ones. There's a company called Hypersynth, and I believe they're in France. And I've been communicating with their boss, and he's got these cards that are called H cards, and they actually store 400 32 patch cartridges. So it's like 264. It's like 12,500 patches on one cartridge across 400 32 patch banks. So that's what I'm into at the moment, is digging through, and now what I'm trying to do is to find third party, if there were any third, because this is one little mystery. So the Dx7 II, the Mark II Dx7, you had this facility to do what you could do on the Dx5, and that was to split and layer sounds. Although it was a single 6 operator engine, you could actually kind of split it in half and have 2 patches at the same time. And that again relied on performance patches. And there were a lot of Dx7 2 banks that came with 2 banks of sounds and a bank of performances as a collection. And I was wondering why there doesn't seem to be any of those kinds of packs of sounds for the Dx5 and the Dx1. Because I've never found them. I've never found anything other than the ones that came with it from the factory. So you get there are 2 carts in there plus that performance cart. Gives you 64 performances and 128 patches. But doesn't seem to be any third party stuff, and I'm just wondering, is that because that there was only 140 DX1s, and I don't know an official number, but I've been kind of told by 2 or 3 different people that there are only a few thousand of the Dx5 made, whereas there's over 200,000 Dx7s. So maybe that's why they didn't really cater for it. But I'm searching, and that's part of the research that I'm doing with the whole Yamaha DX thing at the moment. Sasquatch in the chat room there is hang on, just turn this down. Asks, how much are they? Oh, that's a very good question. Now they're not particularly cheap. These are about £120 per cartridge. Now you think, £120 for one of these? Well, these are custom made. He's had the guy's had all of this manufactured, all this plastic. It's not 3D printed, as far as I can tell. If it is 3D printed, it's very, very good quality 3D printing. And then he hand builds the internals himself. So it's £120 per cartridge. But if you go on eBay or Reverb and search Dx7 cartridge, you're paying anything between £50 and £80 per cartridge. So for one of these, you're paying anything between £50 and £80. And these are ROM carts and just hold 64 presets, and you can't change them, you can't write over them. So for the price of a couple of those, you get one of these that is essentially 16 of these. So when you look at it that way, value for money is incredible. It's very good. And I think the H cards are much the same. They're about 130, I think, depending on where you get them from. So yeah, but what I'm actually looking out for now is I'm looking out for a Dx7 Mark II FD, the one with the floppy disk drive. I think I need one of those in my collection. So I'm just trying to find one. Sasquatch says he has a dead one. They're not normally too difficult to fix unless the power supply is gone. The most common issue with these synths, when people say they're dead, is because they switch them on, they don't make a sound. It's because the battery's gone and there's an internal lithium cell, and once that runs out, all the patches disappear. So yes, Sasquatch, you must try and fix those. In the meantime, hello Wagyu, hello Asio Head, nice to see you guys here, and Mark Calloway, hello, and Mr. Michael Oakley, all the way from Canada. Welcome, sir. You're very welcome indeed. So let's see if we got any questions here. Sasquatch has asked, have you rebuilt any Dx7 power supplies? Had a surge and why? Oh, that's probably why. So have I rebuilt? No, I don't rebuild power supplies. That's not really my forte. For example, with the Fairlights, so the power supplies are pretty solid on those, but when they go, they tend to go fairly spectacularly, and there's very little around. It's not like you can just go out and buy, can I have a Fairlight power supply, please? However, we have managed to, I say we, my colleague in Sydney, Australia, managed to find a Chinese manufacturer who manufactures a power supply that outputs everything that we need it to, and he successfully trialled that in a few Fairlights that he's got, and I've got one, I think. No, actually, no, I've got the PCB for it. But yeah, so they and they're a lot smaller. they're really cheap. They are very effective. They generate a lot less heat, so it's all gravy. So yeah, I mean, Wagyu says, and actually some other people said fuses. It is very common again. Fuses. I mean, the Fairlight Series 3 that I'm working on at the moment downstairs had 2 power rails out that controlled the analog to digital conversion process and the keyboard, the music keyboard connection. And they were literally just 2 little 250 milliamp fuses. Pop those in, and everything's sorted. So, you know, fuses. I mean, there's a reason that we have them. But yeah, I mean, I would check the fuses first, both internally, because there are a few. See if you've got any caps blown. That might be an issue there. Make sure you've got the correct voltage setting if it's got the alternate voltage setting. And if not, chances are you probably have to find a spares or repair Dx7, of which, I mean, there are lots around. They're just not necessarily cheap enough maybe to do it. Asio says, aren't there cartridges that accept 32GB SD flash cards, and can you can put most existing DX patches on in folders so that bounce on the cartridge? So first part of the question, are there cartridges that accept 32GB flash cards? There are certain, I don't know whether, I've not seen anything for Dx7s, but there are lots of SD card options. You know, we use them on the Fairlight. So that one down there has one of those, which is just a regular SD card. It's a 4GB card, and that sits just in there. And that's a floppy disk emulator. So you have to go through like a button pushing process where each button press is like you're putting a disc in and what have you. So it works perfectly fine on the Fairlights. And we use, say, 4GB cards on the Series 2s, and on the Series 3s we use 16GB because the Series 3s could only address 4GB at a time, so we have 4GB partitions. But yes, SD card technology is a godsend with these kind of things. But I've not seen one here. But the second part of the question is, you can put most of the existing DX patches on in folders and select the banks. That would then mean that you'd have to have some kind of logic chip inside the cartridge that could read the directory structure. So that, again, that would probably increase the price. Whereas these just work off a fairly common technology, and it's just like having 16 partitions that are selectable by via a little rotary. I don't know the exact ins and outs. He won't share with me his internal magic. But if you could, get one of those little tiny little computers on a chip type thing, and excuse me, set that up, you could potentially use an SD card and a sort of standard directory structure, I guess. So anyway, sort of like the floppy flash adapters you use on Fairlight. Yeah, that's the sort of thing, but they're quite big. The actual little boards that run those SD cards behind there, and they rely on a screen as well, because the screen then shows you all the disk images and the folders. So again, that's another thing that you'd have to have a screen. But yeah, the H cards, the Hypersynth H cards have a small LED display that simply just reads 1 through 90 or 0 through 99 4 times, and there's a little kind of identifying dot that shows you whether you're on bank 0 to 99, 100 to 199, so on and so forth. But the number just relates to the cart, the virtual cartridge, so to speak. Just like the printed numbers on these, when you turn the wheel, it shows you a printed number. But as I was speaking to the the inventor of these, and he said, I said, why stop at 16? Did you, was there a reason, capacity? He said, no. He said, I could have done as much as the H card systems, but he says 1,024 patches. If you can't load one of these with everything that you want and still have space, it's just so much faffing around to find it. So I guess that's a good point, and it keeps the price down, I suppose. Michael, do you think there will ever be another synth, or probably software, that offers something completely new and game changing in the same way that the Fairlight and the Dx7? That is a great question. It's one that I kind of ask myself a lot. I believe that every kind of generation of synths, there's one that's a game changer that nobody else did. That changed the way, not only the way we make music, but the sound of the music, the styles of the music. So if you think about it, Minimoog, obvious one, because all of a sudden now we've got this portable analog synthesizer rather than one that fills up a room, and it allows keyboard players to be as expressive as a guitarist in a band. So it really kind of freed up those things. And I think the next big thing, I mean, you could go through like all of those classic analog synthesizers, but the bottom line is they're all analog synthesizers. The biggest difference mainly is polyphony, whether it's monophonic or polyphonic. And you could go to the CS80 and say, well, that was a great synthesizer. Was it a game changer? I don't think so. It's been looked back on with great fondness and great lust, but did it change the game? Did it change the way the music was made? No, it kind of expanded what was already there. The next game changer, in my opinion, was the Fairlight, because it brought something to bear that had never been brought before: digital sampling. Something completely new, completely different. And it wasn't just the sampling it brought; it was the sequencing through Page R. And again, it changed not only the way we made music, so now we were using computers to make music using samples, digital samples, but we were also sequencing, and so the style of the music changed. I think we had this conversation on the last stream, was that somebody said, "Can I hear Fairlights in different songs?" And of course, you can hear those classic sounds. But what I tend to hear more is Page R. And you hear the style, you hear the the pattern type stuff that's going on. Page R has a very kind of distinctive feel, like most sequences did back then. Some had a bit of a swing to them and what have you. So, Minimoog, Fairlight. Next one, Dx7. Sorry guys, it's another FM. So Dx7, again, game changer. Why? Digital synthesis, obviously. Reliability, patch storage, and memory. I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it was the first to come up with kind of mass-produced memory cartridges that were just simple plastic things, in, out, straight away, no messing around. I think there might have been some memory type things going on. Certainly before this, Yamaha were using magnetic strips, but it's a little bit. They came in a wallet, and it was all very. So anyway. FM synthesis, so new type of synthesis, a whole range of new sounds that of course changed the music that we were hearing, a whole level of expression and polyphony and functionality, and it basically gave birth to the preset culture, because before then there wasn't really any presets, were there? So, or there were presets, but there was no market for selling presets. People had a job maybe to program them, but you couldn't just like store them on a cartridge and sell them, or certainly not the way we can do now. So I think it kind of brought in that. So Minimoog, Fairlight, Dx7. Next massive game changer was M1, Korg M1. Why? Massive expansion on the digital synthesis front with the sample and synthesis method, which had obviously been pioneered by Roland on the D50. And whilst the Roland D50 is a brilliant synthesizer, and I love the sound of it, did it change the game, or did it just expand, what was already there? The M1 changed the game because of the built-in sequencer. So now you could have 16 tracks of recording, and the keyboard player was no longer just reliant on other people. He could do everything. He could have drums, he could have his bass line, he could, the polyphony was there, the amount of multi-timbrality was there that you could play all of this stuff, and it sounded great. So Minimoog, Fairlight, Dx7, Korg M1, next game changer, Korg again, Korg Prophecy. Again, I'm slightly biased on this one because I love the Korg Prophecy, but Korg Prophecy brought really, again, I don't think it was the very first, but it was one of the most powerful virtual analog synthesizers. But also acoustic modelling as well. So obviously Yamaha had done stuff with the VL1, the VP1, and the smaller, cheaper versions, although they weren't that cheap. But Korg brought to this single machine that could do all of that stuff, and it was game changing. We heard those sounds for a few years. They were kind of like all over the place. So that was what, 95 for the Korg, and then since then, I don't. You could throw in the Wave Station maybe. That was an interesting way of doing things. You could say the PPG Wave back in the 80s was a game changer maybe. I don't know. But I think that for a long while, I don't think there's been anything that has had an impact on not only the way we make music, but that changed the music we were hearing. There's a definite kind of line that you can draw between pre-Fairlight, post-Fairlight, pre-Dx7, post-Dx7. Maybe not so much with the M1. That just was a big enabler for keyboard players, but it was important. I mean, the Korg M1 was heard everywhere. I mean, particularly the late 80s with the boom in house music and that kind of classic organ bass sound and the dance piano patch. And then of course Prophecy, virtual analog. That was again maybe changed more for players rather than it did necessarily the music. Although you listen to albums that were heavy with it, like Fat of the Land by Prodigy. So the original question was, do I think there'll be another one? Yes, I do. Whether it's a software synthesizer or a hardware synthesizer. But I think that we're getting to a point where we're plateauing in terms of the technology, and it's going to take a massive leap in some technology elsewhere for then synthesizer developers to latch onto that. I don't know what that is. If I did, I'd be a millionaire. So I've seen the comments kind of rolling by as I've just been kind of waffling there. So let's go through them. Let's address them one by one, shall we? And of course, feel free to disagree. This is just my opinion, and my opinion's worth shit. So Sasquatch says the CS80 did have poly aftertouch. So that's true. It added, kind of a new kind of performance parameter, or it wasn't the first to do it, but it was certainly one of the most popular. So yes, CS80 did add that, and he also says that the Dx7 keyboard is nice, and again it did. It's kind of set a standard. I mean, so many people still today are using Dx7s purely as controllers. Simon, Simon, I'm so sorry, mate. I got your message and I did respond, and I said I will let you know when I'm doing one, and this was all kind of a bit off the cuff, and I forgot to message you, but glad you made it, mate. So Prophet 5, good call. But again, I kind of put the Prophet 5, which is a fantastic synthesizer, which has a unique kind of sound and a unique way of doing, or not a unique way of doing things, but certainly it has its character and it's a fairly definitive sound. But did it really change the game, or did it just expand and improve on what was already there? And I would put it in the latter rather than the former. But cannot take away from the fact that the Prophet 5, along with the CS80, the Jupiter 8, all of those kind of classic analog synths were and still are, just brilliant machines. Torsten talks about Vast, Kurzweil's Vast. Now, I don't know a huge amount about Vast, but I do know that Kurzweil keyboards, especially those sample-based things, were absolutely amazing in terms of the quality of the sound, and also the way that you could program them. With was it Ray Kurzweil was very much about the user interface. Oh, that's gone cold. Oh. So yeah, definitely. Did it change the game? No, it improved maybe, but there we go. Lindrum, there's me thinking synthesizers. Of course, there are drum machines, and the Lindrum, massively important, as like the first commercial sample-based drum machine, and of course there were others like the Drumulator, the SP12s, and of course MPCs. I'd say the MPC 60 has to be a game changer. I mean, look at what it has spawned. The MPC paradigm still exists today, is still incredibly popular today. So yes, I need to kind of broaden my thing there. Lindrum, definitely. And you could also say, well, sequencers. We haven't talked about sequencers, and DAWs, as they're now known, because they do everything. As your head says, I remember when the Nord came on the market, people were super happy they got knobs back on the synth. Yeah, it's very true. There was that shift in the 90s, wasn't there, from these kind of shiny minimalist surfaces, and now we had virtual analog, and we said, well, let's have the knob control back. Let's have the tactile, live interaction element back, because that's what was missing. And we'd missed it for I don't know how many years. Good 15, almost 20 years maybe. We'd kind of pushed that paradigm out of the way and said, let's go for minimalist and menu diving, and now we can bring in computers to do this. But actually, no, manufacturers realised that we need knobs, and so yes, the Nord heralded that kind of thing. Kawai K1 vector synthesis, yeah. So vector synthesis, whether it's the Kawai, whether it's the Prophet VS or the Wave Station, really good stuff. Very very unique. And actually, I'd like to get hold of maybe a K5000 one day, because I do like that kind of metallic-y additive synthesis kind of thing. FM. FM is a form of additive synthesis. Richard Wright was a big Kurzweil player. Wasn't aware, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. MPCs changed the game, definitely, and Vast enabled you to program any sound source and processing in any combination from it. Yeah, so it was a complex thing. It's not something I've not really gotten into. Do you know one synthesizer I wish I had got when I had the chance was the Technics WSA1. Was it Turnkey in London was selling them off cheap because they just weren't going. And I looked at it, I saw the name Technics and thought, oh, home organ manufacturer, that can't be a proper synthesizer. Duh. And they were selling them for like stupid money. I can't remember exactly how much, but yeah, it can't have been that much because it was in the mid-90s and I was poor and I thought I could afford it. So I wish I'd bought one of those because they're kind of sought after now, and of course they do physical modelling, and I really like physical modelling, and that does it very very well. Maybe one day we'll have to sell a few bits, I think, or find a bigger house. But yeah, I mean, we could go through and pick out all these classic synthesizers. But I guess, the question was, are we going to see anything that is as groundbreaking as the Dx7 or the Fairlight? Because they weren't just, new versions of what had already come, what was already out there. They were just completely new, absolutely completely new. Juno says K2000 certainly was more game changing than the M1. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that. It's certainly sold less, that's for sure. Probably because the price was different, because Kurzweil weren't necessarily cheap, and obviously Korg were a mass producer, so yeah, maybe. Um, excuse me. Wagyu says, "Oh, he's got a WSA 1R. Yes, very nice." And he's just making me jealous now. Weird how Technics didn't do much else in the synth space. Yeah, it's funny because a lot of those organ manufacturers, all at various points, trying to get in on the game. You know, Elka did, and Gem. Seem to remember Gem doing one or two synthesizer keyboard things that were, professional synths rather than arranger keyboards or home organs. And they kind of dipped in their toe in the water and then came out again. And I guess the big boys sold off. I used to own an Elka X605 dual manual with foot pedal combo organ, which had a synthesizer element to it as well as the organ. And I bought it from a guy in East London, somewhere near where the Olympic Stadium is. I remember they were building it at the time, and I was working, and then I managed to get it into the back of my car. Huge thing it was, and I had this idea that I was going to have this organ, put it on a stand, and it was going to adorn my front room, and my kids would sit there and learn how to play, and it would foster their love of music. And I think I had it in my house for about 2 months, and I sold it on eBay, and I sold it to a collector in Italy, because obviously Elka are Italian, and I sold it to a collector in Italy for like £150, I think it was, and the postage was about the same amount of money, which was crazy, but that's what they wanted. And so yeah, it was all packed up and sent off, and I don't miss it really. It's a big hulking great thing, and so it didn't have the actual original legs, because it was a huge thing. I put it on a keyboard stand, and we gently lowered it on the keyboard stand, which was something similar to that. It just went it just wouldn't hold it. Huge. Elka sold the last batch of Synthex for £500 each and couldn't sell. I mean, imagine that Synthex is going for £500 and not being able to sell them. Jesus, it's crazy, isn't it? Francesca says, "What's your next project with any of the Fairlights?" Oh, by the way, hello Richard. Hope you're staying safe. So what's my next project? So at the moment I've got 2 Series 3s in the garage, one of which is literally the most complete system I've ever had in here. It's a Series 3 mainframe with the music keyboard, the original monitor, the original Alpha keyboard, maxed out with the original hard drive, tape drive and floppy drive, which have now come out because they're pretty redundant. And then we're going to make sure that all the cards are the latest versions of the cards, running the latest version of the final version of the CMI software. Also came with an external unit that's about so big. It's a huge thing. It's got a hard disk drive and another tape drive in it, and it just connects via SCSI. Excuse me. So anyway, and that all comes flight cased with fantastic collection of flight cases, boxes and boxes and boxes of floppy disks and tapes, which is going to be a job to go. I mean, there is a lot there. I'll have to take some pictures, or maybe do one of these from down in the garage. So the plan is that we fix up both of the systems that I've got down there. One is like a partial system with it's just the mainframe basically. So you'd be surprised how many people actually buy just mainframes. They don't necessarily want the Alpha keyboard and the music keyboard, because obviously Series 3s had full MIDI compatibility, and the Alpha keyboard can be replaced with a regular modern day Alpha keyboard if you buy one of these little conversion boxes. So monitor wise, again, we can put a VGA output, so you don't need the original monitor. You can just go to one of those those. So you'd be surprised how many people actually just buy mainframes. But anyway, so we've got this full system. I think Peter might have said he might have found someone who's looking to buy that one. But that will be a big sale because it's fully complete. And then the other one will just get that up to speed. It needs a bit of work on it to get it, because it's an early one, so to get it running the latest version of all of the cards, like the waveform supervisor and the sampling cards and the latest version of the operating system, we actually have to make a couple of modifications to the motherboard. So we'll do that later another time. Inky's got to go. Good night, Lisa. Thank you for joining. Glad you could make it. So that's that. Then the Series 2. So I know it's immediately apparent, but that floppy drive bay just there is empty. So I've got 3 floppy drives downstairs, so I need to put a floppy drive in there, although it's not essential because of course we have the SD card drive just over there. But cosmetically it just looks a bit nicer. But I'd like to actually get it going, so if I come across any Series 2 floppies, I can transfer them over. But as far as that actual mainframe there is concerned, that's pretty much complete because we've got all the voice cards. It's got a full set of 8 voice cards in there and everything's working. This keyboard is completely functional, I believe. I think that there's one dead key on there, but I need to fix that. But other than that, it's completely operational. Only thing I need for this is a genuine VDU and a genuine alpha keyboard, and then it's completely working. At the moment, I'm using either one of these, which is a Series 3 keyboard, because they work. And that's the amazing thing with the Fairlights. Even with between the Series 2s and the Series 3s, there's so many interchangeable parts. And I think I showed this the last time on here, which was a box that's designed by a guy called Joe Britt. Has an LED panel at the front, which replicates the LED panel on the keyboard. And then on the back it has USB, MIDI, various connections, and of course the numerical keypad. So basically, if you had just one of these, you can operate it through one of these little boxes, and these are aluminium, just brilliant little devices. And Joe's actually working on some great stuff at the moment. A fully internally housed USB mouse adapter, so you won't need the box if you just want if you haven't got a light pen, because a light pen, they're quite rare and very delicate. So the fact that he's designed this card, it's a very small PCB with all the stuff on, and he's just put like 2 strips on it so it fits in the slot. But it's got a USB port on there, and then you just he routes that USB port to a socket that he's built into the back of the case, and you just plug a USB mouse in, and it's fantastic that these people are doing amazing stuff to keep it all going. It's fantastic. Right, let's see if we can catch up here. Wagyu says he'd love an update on the guy who was flying to Australia to pick up a CS8 and needed to disassemble it to get it home, and hoping to buy a seat on an aeroplane. Is he insane? That's mental. Sorry, that's just bonkers. But each to their own. Torsten says the Schmidt is also a game changer. Again, I've never really played one. I hear it's a very lovely thing, but it seems like a bit like the Moog 1. It's an expensive toy. It's very good, but it's very expensive. So, where on earth do you source an unused Fairlight, says Sasquatch? Very good question. You'd be surprised. I'm always surprised that they turn up where they do, when they do. I mean, the system that we've got downstairs, the one that I'm currently working on, was bought by a gentleman who's actually Australian, but has lived in the UK for many, many years. He's retired, and he's a bit like all of us. He's kind of like a hobbyist musician, or didn't really, I think he worked in the city, finance or something, but he, like us, he has a fascination with these things, and he had a bit of money, so he bought a Fairlight, this Fairlight Series 3 from Nashville, from a session musician that operated out of Nashville. And he's had it in his house for years, and just decided that it wasn't getting used, so he was going to pass it on. So we got wind of this and bought it. But it was in the middle of deepest, darkest Surrey in England, just south of London, and they're just sitting in some guy's house. Somebody sent me some pictures a little while back of somebody opened up their garage and said, "Oh yeah, there's a Fairlight over there." Like it's like a garden spade or something. It's just bonkers. So they are around. There are only a few hundred ever made across all series. 1, 2, and 3. And of course they're getting less and less. We've been responsible for taking a few out of service because they're beyond repair. So we just cannibalise them for parts. But you'd be surprised, they are around up there. Wagyu says, what hardware does the Fairlight operating system run on from a computer perspective? What CPU? So, the Series 1s and the early Series 2s ran on the Motorola 6800, not the 68,000. The 68,000 was used more in the Series 3. I think the 68,000 sits on the MIDI card. So basically, it's the 6800, 6802 I think was in the Series 2X. I always forget these. I haven't been doing any seminar sessions recently, so let's just bring up my spec sheets. But yeah, the Motorola processors. So the story goes that Tony Furs was this guy who created this system called the Quasar, and it was an additive synthesizer, and it wasn't very good at what it did, and he tried to then, because he worked for RCA, he had access to Motorola and Motorola processors, so we got two 6800s and just built this computer system around that, and then Kim and Peter got wind of what what he was doing, went along, saw it, said, yeah, we can maybe try doing something with this, and that's what they did. So it was dual 6800 processors that were running, and they were running in serial mode, and it was just the way that they customized the operation of these two processors meant that it could do far more than just like a regular 6800 processor based computer could do. I don't even want to profess that I know exactly what it was doing internally in the CPU, but it was apparently a very clever way of utilizing the processors in a serial kind of fashion. So yeah, it was 6800s in the first series, and then into the the Series 2's 6800s as well, and then they went up to the 6802s with the 2X, and then the Series 3. That's when we started seeing the 68,000 processors coming in. So dual processors for the CPU, and then 6809, yes. So the 68,000s weren't until the Series 3, which all my cards are downstairs. I've got the CPU card, dual processors, and then there's a processor on every voice card as well, running the custom code and software that dynamically processes each voice. So every voice card is dynamically allocated, and every voice card's filter is dynamically processed so that every note that's played is tracked, and the correct amount of filtering is applied to get rid of the aliasing. And that's how the Fairlight sound is, how it sounds, is especially when you start getting far away either side of the root note. sound gets kind of slightly duller and duller as the filters take more and more away of the aliasing that was inherent in the machine, so to speak. So yeah, that's what it was inside of those. And of course, I think you can still buy those chips, but luckily, because they're just, these chips, they just run and run and run and run. We very rarely have to replace any of those. But yes, they were very expensive, hence why the Fairlight cost what it did. I mean, the Fairlight, Peter and Kim are brilliant people who invented some amazing things, but the one thing that neither of them were decent businessmen. Each Fairlight obviously contained technology that was cutting edge, processors, memory, all sorts of different things, custom code, which obviously had to be developed. Every machine was hand built, so every piece of metalwork was hand made and put together by a guy called Alan Galt. All the woodwork, because the keyboards are all all of this is wood casing. All of that was done by Alan Galt. The monitors, again, all done. Certainly up to the Series 2s were metal and wood construction. So everything was hand built, process built in. And of course the keyboard mechanisms were all the latest stuff. And there are some areas of the Fairlight where you look through and you think, oh, that's a bit cheap, but there's not many. But most of it, we say, it was a very powerful, very expensive thing to build, hence the price. And of course, the other thing was that when they were asked how much they were going to sell them for, it literally was a chin scratching process. And what do you think? Oh, well, let's say 25,000, and that sounds like a lot of money. It was, but certainly back then it was even more money. But they kind of plucked those figures out of the air, and what they should have been charging maybe was more, because obviously the company went bankrupt within a decade. But that was a number of factors. It was the fact that they didn't have a very agile process to scale and to adapt and to move around. They hadn't invested very wisely. They were potentially selling a lot of things at a loss. And of course, all these other companies came out with newer, more efficient and cheaper ways of doing the cool things that the Fairlight could do. And once companies were producing, like EMU and Sonic and Akai were producing samplers, and then all of a sudden we had the home computer revolution that enabled us to have computer-based sequencers. Well, we could do pretty much everything that a Fairlight could do. We just had to buy 2 or 3 different machines and connect them, but it was obviously a lot cheaper. So, yes, we've got most of those processors in FPGA now, which is very true. When you think a Raspberry Pi equivalent can do more, that's very true. But there is something about the original hardware. So one of the questions that I often hear, or things that you often hear on the internet, I haven't heard it for a while though, is you can do a Fairlight in an iPhone because they're infinitely more powerful, and they processor wise, of course they are. They've got more processor power, they've got more storage space, they've got more memory, and everything along those lines works incredibly fast. And yes, you can replicate the Fairlight to a degree within a mobile device. You can replicate it to a certain degree as a software plugin, but what it's missing is the architecture, the structure, the bad things. It's all very well saying we can do processes thousands and thousands of times more powerful than what was in the Fairlight, but you have to recreate to get the true Fairlight sound and that kind of processing. You have to recreate exactly what they did, which was 40-odd-year-old computer technology. So lots of things would need to be replicated in software. And as far as I know, and so I'm not a software programmer, but I've spoken to Peter Vogel about this, and and other people, and the general consensus is that you have to do everything in FPGA, which is not cheap. Or it's getting cheaper now, but certainly 10 years ago it wasn't that cheap. You have to do it all in FPGA. You have to model everything, and you have to have something that's dedicated. So if you think about the CMI 30A, which was this 30th anniversary machine that Peter brought out around 2011, I think it was, that was running on a Hewlett-Packard PC as its basis, but it was running these cards called Crystal Core, which were made by the then Fairlight company that kind of grown out of the ashes of the old one, and those there were FPGA audio, digital DSP cards, and I think there was at least one, if not two, in that PC running their dedicated input-output units as well, and that's what it took to kind of faithfully recreate the Fairlight experience in terms of the sonics and what it does to a sound in a computer. Now, most people's computers don't have FPGA audio card, DSP cards, and so to make a VST, for example, or a plugin, you are using a lot of your system processes, and that just makes it inefficient. You're running a plugin replica of the Fairlight in our kind of environments is because it's just inefficient. Secondly, also, how many people actually want to recreate the Fairlight's processes, and all of those kind of things? Most people I speak to, I would say 90 to 95% of the people I speak to, I ask, having conversations like this, and I always say, what do you actually want? Do you want something that replicates the Fairlight process exactly? Or do you just want those classic sounds? And the answer that comes back virtually every time is, we just want those classic sounds. Okay, they're out there. And you only have to pay a few £100 for them, maybe less. If you want those sounds, they're there. Go and get them. And then use them in your modern environment, and you get the Fairlight sound. In a mix, no one's going to tell. Not even the biggest Fairlight expert in the world would be able to tell whether it's a genuine Fairlight or whether it's your sample library in a mix. Side by side, without anything else, yes, you'll tell, but not in the mix. And secondly, that process, if you actually do want that process, it is horrible. To put it bluntly, if you're used to the way we make music nowadays with computers, where it's like instant drag, drop, blah, 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 all of that stuff is just so easy and simple. And when you go to a Fairlight, it's very, very clunky, very, very slow. Yes, it's interesting. Yes, it's nostalgic, it's unique, but not many people would want that. There's a very small proportion of people that would actually want the Fairlight, the hardware, so they could sample into it and get that colorization that you get. And as I think Wayne was just said in here, those classic sounds it's a synthesis applied to those sounds. So yeah, this is the thing. So it all depends on who sampled those sounds. If they've sampled them directly from the outputs, and they've multi-sampled across the board, then you're going to get some kind of indication of what the synthesis is doing inside the Fairlight to give you those sounds. So the lower you go, the more filters applied, you get that kind of colorization that the Fairlight gives. So if you've sampled them really well, then you've got a good one. If you just sample one note from a Fairlight, so say middle C, and then you stretch it up and down the keyboard just like you did on a Fairlight, but you don't stick it through that filtering process and that digital to analog conversion process, then you're not going to get the same sort of character. It's going to sound similar, but it's not going to be the same. So the Fairlights, like for example the the Arturia's plugin has been sampled very, very well. So, it sounds good. And quite honestly, if you created 2 tracks identically, but had the Fairlight in one and the Arturia plug in the other, then you probably won't be able to tell between the two in a mix. You would next to each other, almost certainly. And when you hear a Fairlight, plug it into an amp, speakers, and you hear it, it shifts air. It's a very powerful sound, but in today's world, you're never really going to notice. So let's go through some comments here. James, hi James. I'm almost surprised Fairlight didn't make something smaller like a voice card system to use. Yeah, I think had they survived beyond the early 90s, then I think maybe they would have done. But the thing was, at that time, when the company had gone bust because there were cheaper, more affordable alternatives in the market, so they decided to move into an area where their expertise was still being used, and that was post-production. So they were producing the Series 3s and then the MFX and the MFX2 and then the MFX3. The MFX3 being the first Fairlight system that didn't include CMI capability. And then they just carried on. Then, of course, that went bust and then was taken over. And then they just purely focused on audio post-production. So, excuse me, that's where that went. But, I think had they survived, that they might have gone down that route. A bit like kind of Emu did when they went with Creative, as they kind of shoved everything on a board and stuck it in the PC. We've already said that one there. Most people want to... this is JPP Age 2. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. Most people want to replicate the result, not the process in the interface. That's it. That's exactly it. Most people. There are some that do. I personally don't really like the process on here. I find it unique and interesting, and what I also like is when you're showing it to people who've never seen it before, that the kind of look of horror and wonder at the same time. But yes, most people want the sounds, the result, as you say, not the process and the interface. If it's a Fairlight playing middle C and then some completely modern technique transposing it above it, then it's not interesting at all. Very true. I had I wouldn't say an argument. I had a disagreement, shall we say. So I got involved with Peter Vogel when I helped with this, which you probably just hear. So let me just turn it on by... Oh, no, I don't want to do that. It's going to blow up now. Is it going to blow up? No, there you go. Anyway. You hear it. There we go. So this is the iOS app. Now, this is a lovely little thing. But here's the thing. Peter Vogel's whole principle behind this thing was it to be an historical, educational, informative piece of software. He didn't want it to be a high-end mobile app synthesizer, along the lines of the things that Korg do and so on. He wanted something that was just kind of easy, accessible, educational, told the story of Fairlight, and generated him a little bit of income. Excuse me. So anyway, a lot of people like this, and good for them, because it's a nice little app, and it does kind of give you a flavour. It's not, if you go into Page R. Okay, so Page R looks, very much like Page R. It's very simple, very rudimentary, 8 channels, all monophonic. There's, there have been some differences applied there. If you go into the sampler page, well, that's slightly different, but it gives you an idea of what you could do. But it's the actual Fairlight sampling page looks nothing like that. But what you can do with this is, you've got access to the Series 2 library. So, for example, let's go all voices. So you can see on there, you've got the discs on this side here, and you just scroll through. I can't do this the other way because it's all mirrored in my thing. So you scroll through, and then you choose a disc. So let's choose that one. And then you choose the sound on the disc by tapping it. Okay, so that brings the sample up. And you can scroll through and so it's lovely, and it gets you instant access to those sounds. So my point that I'm trying to make is that I had this disagreement online because this guy said to me, he said, I've got the real deal here. This sounds just like the real Fairlight. And I said, well, it sounds, it's got the library sounds. It sounds close. But it's samples of samples. So basically the process here was that we took the entire Fairlight Series 2 library, the factory library, and the audio files that comprise, so the .vc files that are native files for the Fairlight. They're essentially just digital audio files, very similar to your WAV format. The header's slightly different, and you just strip a couple of bits away and you convert it to a WAV file. So it's a very simple process. There's a batch conversion process that happened over a day. They got all these sounds and they stripped away all the stuff and made them into WAV files. Took those WAV files, dumped them into memory. What you're playing back is a WAV file. That's all that is. But he was convinced that this app had completely modelled the internal processes of a Fairlight. And I said, it hasn't. This is going through Apple's iOS audio system. That's all that's happening. But he was convinced with his own ears that what he was hearing was as good as the real deal. And I said, well, look, if that's what turns you on, if that makes you happy, fine. It's absolutely fine. But this isn't, don't be fooled. This is not doing what that box of tricks does. It really isn't. But he wouldn't have it, and we just had to leave it there. And I'm sure that he still thinks that that's okay. But what can I say? Some people, you just can't talk to them, can you? Right, so what have we got? Let's catch up. Welcome to everyone that's joined. Welcome, Marshall. Good to see you here. So let's see. Let's catch up with some of these comments. Some stuff there that I don't understand, so I'm going to skip past that. Page R reminds me of an old BBC Micro with the A5000. Yeah, it's similar, I guess. 5 1/4 inch floppies. Well, the Fairlight was 8 inch. The 5 1/4s were EMU, but Fairlights are 8 inch. Again, I should have gone downstairs and brought a box up because I've literally got cratefuls of the bloody things, with some interesting stuff on. Still got a box full of them. Yeah, you can see my collection. C64, yeah, they used 5 1/4 inch, didn't they? I always hankered after a 5 1/4 inch drive for my Commodore. Wagyu still has his Commodore 128. I had a Commodore 128, the keyboard version that came out. It looked a little bit Amiga-ish, but I remember when it came out, I saved up like all my paper round money and I sold my Commodore 64 to a friend. When was this? This must have been 86 that the 128 came out, around then. And I sold my Commodore 64 to this friend. He was a good friend. And he said, how much do I want for it? And I said, whatever it was that I paid for it back in 83 or whatever. And he said, all right then. And he just gave me the money. And so I had enough to buy the 128. And I remember I went to Debenhams, which is a department store here in the UK. And I think, was it $299? And I got the Commodore 128, which had the 3 operating modes. It had the C64 operating mode, the C128 operating mode, and then the CPM mode. And I kind of justified it to myself, because at school we got CPM machines, like the Research Machine 380Z that we used to use in school, and a bunch of others. But I never used it. I really didn't. I used it as a Commodore 64. I should have just kept my original one and be done with it. And I have no idea what happened to it. I must have sold it to someone, because I don't have it anymore, which is a real shame. The only thing I used it for the Commodore 64 mode, and I've still got, just out there, I've got my is it SFX, the FM sound expander cartridge. It went in the back with the controller keyboard. Again, still got that. It's in the garage. With the Sound Studio, the Commodore Sound Studio software. But that's FM. Can you see where it all started? So Marshall says, glad to get the notification of live. I'm glad you got it, because I wasn't aware it was sending them out, so that's good. Excellent stuff. I guess you only get it if you subscribe. So if you want to be notified, subscribe, because I'm thinking we're going to be doing more of these, whether it's me or whether it's the ProSynth Network thing, which we'll talk about later anyway. Should I get an Oberheim for my floppies? Yeah, go for it. Or a PPG wave term. When I come up to see you again, Simon, you're going to have to let me have a play on your wave term. I had a go on one. So I had a go on the Stock Aitken and Waterman PPG. It was 2.3 wave and the wave term, and it was kind of like an A and a B. So it had the 5 1/4 inch drives, but it was kind of like a hybrid-y type thing. Anyway, it still branded PWL on the end cheeks, and it had been picked up from Pete Waterman's place in Liverpool, I think it is. He's got a storage facility there, and it was the very PPG that was used on Dead or Alive's You Spin Me Round, and it's actually still got some of the sample discs from there, and he loaded it up. And unfortunately, I was at the same show with the Fairlight, so I couldn't spend that much time over there. And it was a 2-day event, and he didn't come back for day 2, unfortunately, so I didn't get a chance to really play around with it, and I'd love to. I've got the plug-in, but that's just not the same. Wagyu says, I have that app, but I've not upgraded it to the full thing. I'm guessing you're talking about the PPG. I bought the 3V when it was on half price sale, so I think I paid 75 quid for it, and then I recently upgraded my 2 to like the final version for about €20, because they got they did a pack, don't they? The Attack Dipole PPG Wave 2. It's got the Waldorf edition or something, and that was on sale. I thought, oh, go on. That's kind of nice to have a couple of those. I have some keyed samples from a Fairlight on your so Sasquatch there saying he's got some samples from Fairlight on his Kurzweil. Everywhere you go, people have got Fairlight samples on emulators, or emulator samples on Kurzweils, or Kurzweil samples on Synclaviers, or Synclavier samples on Fairlights, because back then nobody really cared about, or nobody bothered about the legal aspect. It was just like, I was speaking to Steve Levine about this, and he said, we all kind of came up with some stuff, and then we all kind of went over to see the other guys. So Trevor Horn would go and see him, or he'd go and see Trevor Horn, and they'd say, oh, have a listen to this, and they'd play him, and they'd say, oh, can I borrow that? And they said, yeah, go on then. So because like Trevor bought a Fairlight, but ended up being more of a Synclavier user, and Steve was a Fairlight user. So what would happen, Steve would let Trevor sample some of his stuff onto the Synclavier, and Trevor would let Steve sample some of his stuff onto the Fairlight. And so all these sounds then start going around, and the origins then become very muddy. So, for example, the shakuhachi that you hear at the beginning of Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer, or all the way throughout most albums by Enigma, that features, I've opened up Fairlight libraries and that's in there. I've opened up Akai libraries and that's in there. But it's actually an emulator sound. It came from a patch called Loon Garden, I think, originally. It was like multi-sampled bank on an emulator 1 or 2. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. And it was called Loon Garden, and it had all sorts of different sounds like waterfall sounds and odd animal sounds, and then this shakuhachi. And then eventually somebody made just a single patch of it. I've got it on the Emacs. Fire it up. So that then was an emulator sound, but of course, it ended up on all sorts of things and all sorts of different systems because it's a sample. That's what people do. And the other thing that people used to do, and again, this is another debate. No, this wasn't a debate. This was a full-blown argument. There's a guy on YouTube who randomly posts he has no content whatsoever, and I posted one of my videos about the Ian Stanley Fairlight, which obviously Ian Stanley was part of Tears for Fears, both in the studio and on stage, and the Series 2 was used throughout songs from The Big Chair, and the Series 3 didn't. It was featured on other albums, mainly because Roland had one, Roland Orzabal. But this guy, I posted this video and said, something about Tears for Fears, blah blah blah, and this machine was used because that machine that I had here was used on the early writing sessions for Seeds of Love before Ian and Chris Hughes parted ways with Roland and Kurt. So this guy says, "Oh no, Tears for Fears never used the Fairlight. It was all emulator." So I said, "Sorry, no, it was the Series 2 that was all through songs from The Big Chair. No, it was all emulator. No, it was Series 2. There's documented evidence, verbal, written evidence from Chris Hughes, Roland Orzabal, Ian Stanley. But no, he was adamant that it was all emulator." And I said, why? Where's your evidence? So he showed me a clip from a Tears for Fears live performance, which I think it's on at least one of the box sets of the recent reissues. And there's Ian Stanley and the lady whose name always escapes me. They had two keyboard players, Ian and this lady, I can't remember her name, and they've both got an emulator each. He's also got he's got a Hammond organ and a Jupiter 8 or something, and she's got the CP70. But they've both got emulators. And he said, "There you go, there's the proof." I said, "No, that's not proof. What that is the band saying, do we want to take a Fairlight on tour, or do we want to take an emulator on tour? The emulator, more reliable, cheaper, smaller, lighter, or the Fairlight? Go figure." Because they just sampled everything into the emulator and took it out on tour, and that was a common practice. I think, James Bennett says that Michael Jackson played the Beat It intro from emulators on tour. Actually, Jackson used to take synclaviers on the road, but it's very likely that at some point, certain sounds would have been on different samplers. You just sample it. Wagyu says the Synclavier Beat It gong is on the emulator too. Also, I've found it on Fairlight libraries. That's a Synclavier FM patch. It's not actually a sample, it's an FM patch that's been sampled. Nikki Holland, that's it. Thank you, Simon. That was the lady that used to play live with, and went on to carry on playing beyond, onto the Seeds of Love tours and everything like that. Yes, Nikki Holland, that's the name. So let's catch up with the chat here. I'm flabbergasted that Stockache and Walkman ever used such advanced synthesis. Their songs always sound a couple of steps above a Yamaha PSS. You should see their studio. I've seen bits of their studio. They had pretty much everything. They had the first Series 3 in the UK. The first Fairlight Series 3. And it was a custom job. Because it was black. And it wasn't black. So the American distributors of the Fairlight used to paint some of their systems black. Because that was just a thing that they could sell over there. but they never came from the factory black unless you pre-ordered it and specified it. And the stock Aitken and Waterman Series 3, which I have seen, is black and not just hand painted. It's proper. It's manufactured with a black front panel, black back panels, all the 331 cards at the back, which are the channel output cards, the MIDI output cards, the SMPTE cards, the sampling cards, all of the strips, the blanket, the plates at the back, all printed black with white text on top, everything black. You won't see many black ones because, I say, they generally never. The customer had to specify and then pay a considerable amount of money. Excuse me, to do that. So but they had a kit full of stuff. I mean, the Stock Aitken and Waterman studio down in London. It was in Borough near Borough Market somewhere. Absolutely chock full of the latest gear. What happened to Stock Aitken and Waterman? I think Aitken and Stock are still doing stuff, and Pete Waterman just trades on his ego and his history, and he appears in those Vox Pops type, whatever happened to the 1980s. And he takes all the credit when all he did was sit there with a cigar and say, do this, do that. So somewhere I have, so this is Simon, somewhere I have some George Michael vocal samples from Andy Richards on disc. I'm not at all surprised by that, and you must play me them next time I come over. James says, pretty sure some of the Fairlight samples made their way into the Sonic. Yeah, it was incredibly incestuous. And they're all over the place. No one worried about copyright in those days, says Sasquatch. Absolutely. It was only when people started realising they could sue other people for stuff that it all got a little bit fraught. James says, Depeche Mode used to sample their synclavier onto their emulators, supposedly. Yeah, I think for live work, they either had E2s or Emaxes, which is what they ended up. I mean, there were Emax 2s on the Songs of Faith and Devotion tour, and then before that it was Emax 1. So around like the 101 tour, it was Emax, the first Emaxes, maybe mixed in with one or two emulator 2s, Dx7s, because it could make those metallic-y type sounds that they were so fond of. Akai really took the ball with sampling, says Sasquatch. Yeah, they pretty much did. I mean, they went on for many years, and I've got 3 Akai rack samplers down there. I've got an S2000, an S6000, and a prototype Z8, and a couple of MPCs as well, which I barely touch. Actually, I've only got one MPC. I've sold the other one. But yeah, they really did. They became kind of the factory industry standard across the board, and they are great. I mean, the S6000 is still a dream to work with. It's the most easiest sampler to work with just hardware. Don't need a software interface, although they did make one that was very good. My 2X was used on the Beat It tour, says Simon. You flash git. How many have you got now? Or is that something you don't want to broadcast publicly, you flash bastard? Simon is one of the most ardent collectors, and he just sits on the periphery, bless him. But I'm glad he does in a way. He's a good man. Good man. Never seen a black one, says Wagyu. Fairlight? Okay, yeah. Where's that black Series 3 now, Rob? Can't tell you, mate. I'd have to kill you. Let's just say it's a long, complicated, and probably a story that's probably not best spoken about in a public forum. But I believe it's still around. So it might surface one day. So yeah, we'll see. So this is nice. What's the time now? It's 9:45 UK time. I don't know what where you all are around the world, but I hope you're having a lovely evening, and thanks ever so much for joining in. It's just me doing a lot of talking, answering your questions. Chris has joined us here. Yeah, all the usual suspects. James says there's a photo of Paul McCartney taken around 89 with an emulator Mark 1. Yeah. There's actually a picture of Paul McCartney and George Martin with a Fairlight. It's like a Polaroid picture that I've seen, and I believe that George Martin wanted to try and persuade Paul to use the Fairlight. Paul wasn't having any of it. I don't know why. Whether it's just the interface, I don't know. But I think maybe I suppose if you go to a guy that used the Mellotron so well, and then say, here's a Fairlight, what does it do? Well, it's kind of like a Mellotron, except you have to understand computing. Then I guess it's going to put you off. And then somebody comes along and says, here's an emulator. And he says, what does this do? And he says, well, it's kind of like a Mellotron. And there's no computer learning involved. It's just, instead of tapes, it's just digital information. I guess you'd probably gravitate to an emulator. I love it. I love the whole emulator paradigm. The way that you sample on it is just so beautifully simple, and you don't need anything more than a small screen. It's just so beautifully done. I was dead chuffed when I managed to get one. It really is a lovely, lovely thing. Simon's in Hong Kong. I thought you were back in the UK, mate, because last week you were in San Francisco. There is a reason why Simon is a well-travelled man. I'm sure if he wants to tell you, he'll tell you. He's a hired hitman. 5:45, yeah, blimey, yes, because I've got a colleague that works out there. I'm surprised you're out there, mate, but good on you, because you're clearly still working. Sasquatch. Now, somebody did say earlier on, I was going to mention it, but this ties in nicely. So I don't know if it was you or somebody else, but have you ever used the Tronics DT7? No, and like you, I've never seen one in the wild, much like the gelling house that it's based on. But I would love to have a go. I really would, because having knob per function and being able to kind of live tweak a Dx7 or 5, because I've seen it demoed on a 5. I would love to have a go, but they're not cheap. I think we've established this in the last stream that we did. They're not cheap, and they're very big. And right now, I don't have anywhere to put one. But I would love to. If they're watching, or anybody knows them, because I think, are they based in Holland? If anybody knows, I'd love to have one in for review. Anyway. What else have we got here? Wagyu says, I've played Need 2, but the guy wanted $4,000. Yeah, they are. I've seen them go for 2 and above, and I think 4 is probably about the most you could get for one. I think Tom from Analog Solutions was trying to sell his for about 4. I know someone, I don't know if he's sold it yet, but I know someone in LA who's got an Emulator 1 for sale. I think it's still available. I haven't spoken to him for a few weeks, but if anybody wants an Emulator 1, they're nice. That's an Emax 2 though over there. You can't really see it because the microphone's in the way. That's an Emax 2, which I picked up from a studio in Brighton back last year for £450. It's just the base model, so it's only got like 1 meg of RAM, and can't be upgraded. Apparently, I didn't. Had I known, I might have skipped it, but I saw it for 450. I thought, no, I've got to have that. Very happy with that. James says Synclavier rig was doing the rounds on eBay not too long ago. Yeah, there are a few. That might have been Tony's. There's a guy here in the UK called Tony Gallagher, who had 2 or 3 and was doing them up and selling them. But he's told me a lot about his experiences with those, and I think I get off easy with Fairlights. Sasquatch is still on the hunt for Dx7 power supplies. Simon's surprised that he's in Hong Kong as well, but that's another story. Oh, well, I'll look forward to hearing that one. Wagyu's. We spoke about this the other day about them not working properly live on a Mark 1 DX7 or TX7. I've seen it working with the DX5 live there's a video. I think it's their own video. I think it's the manufacturer's video. They've got a DX5 and they're tweaking it live, so it clearly works. I think on the 5, but I've not got one to try. I wouldn't mind actually, because I was speaking to Dr. Manny Fernandez about the Reface DX, because I'm not a big fan of this whole kind of small mini boutique synth thing, but that sounds nice, and for what it is, you could don't even bother with the keyboard, just use it as a tone module. But Tronics did a little real-time controller for that. It's kind of like the thing sits above, it's like on a frame sort of thing, and it looks very good. But Dr. Fernandez said he liked it, but he still prefers using like a Sound Mondo web page that you can access to fiddle it, and it's just like tab shift tab, and then just use your cursor keys to up or down the values. Excuse me. Blimey. James says, can't find that McCartney pic, but I've just found one of him with Elvis Costello's playing an Emu 2. There's definitely let's see if I can find that pic. Paul McCartney, Fairlight. I'll put in George Martin because I know he's in the picture as well, and do that, go to images, and it's the first thing I see. Let me so if you all right, so who was asked? It was James. So James, go to Google and just type in the following 5 words: Paul McCartney, Fairlight, George Martin, and the first pic that Google Images will throw up is that Polaroid pic of what looks like either probably a Series 1. Excuse me. There's actually a second. Oh, look, there's a second picture of Paul with it sitting the other side of the Fairlight. Oh wow, I've never seen that one before. Well, there you go. I've discovered something. Let's drop that into the archive. There seems to be a whole range of Paul McCartney Polaroid pictures. I got some brilliant pictures from Steve Levine with the Beach Boys using the Fairlight, which was a thing to behold. Seeing the Beach Boys using a CMI. It's not kind of thing that you find there. Anyway, Sasquatch says, I have a TX7 in storage, never used it, haven't had to until now. I've got one over there, and it's an awkward thing to use because you've got no direct editing buttons. You have to do everything using software. So I use Dx7 to mess around with the sounds in that, which works perfectly fine. But I would like to marry it up with a Dx7, simply to experience that symbiotic relationship that they have, because they work together very well apparently. Web MIDI users are going to get buggered when those pages disappear. Yeah, probably. Yeah, cloud-based stuff. Yeah, it's kind of the way it's going, and I suppose if you want to sort of keep up with the times, you've got no choice. I mean, I'm still in two minds whether to go for the Roland Cloud. So I've had a trial. I've had 2 or 3 trials, I think. I had the original trial, and then they did this thing, and they said, if you've already had a trial, have another one on us. So I did that, and then I tried it again with a different email address, and I liked everything about it, but I was just a little bit kind of reticent to give them money for them to maybe take it away, or for it to then not be supported, or it's just not quite sure. But anyway, I might just go for it and try it for a year and see how we're getting on, sort of 6-7 months in. And if I like it, I might renew it. If I don't like it, then I'll just print everything to audio and go from there. I don't know. We'll see. Marshall says he's a big fan of the Roland Cloud. I think I remember you saying. Yeah, it's very Marmite. Sorry, that's an English term. So Marmite is this spread that it's like a yeast extract spread that you spread on toast or put on cheese and stuff. And it's very salty, and you either love it or you hate it. It's as simple. There's very little in between. I don't think I've ever met anyone that said, "Oh, Marmite, I could take it or leave it." Never heard anybody say that. So yeah, sorry, that just explaining that phrase. You either people really love the Rolling Cloud or they really hate it. There doesn't seem to be many in betweens. Yeah, and there is this thing where every 12 months you get to keep one of them. So that's nice. So at least if I do it for a year, at least I can keep, say, the D50, which is probably the one I'd choose first. What I was actually impressed by, out of all those synth recreations, was the System 8. I liked that, and it almost made me think, well, maybe I should get a hardware one. Because a lot of people again rave about the System 8, and the fact that you can plug out some of those synths to the hardware is an interesting concept. So yeah, we'll see. I'm getting close to ordering it. Yeah. I went through a phase many years ago. I got divorced, and I ended up building up a huge debt, and it took me years, over a decade, to clear that all up. And I did. Every last penny, I paid every last penny back. And ever since then, anything that's remotely more than the cost of a record or a CD or something, I'm like, do I really need to spend this money? He says, surrounded by synthesizers. But even these things make me nervous. I remember when I bought my first iPad for the Fairlight. It was to do with the Fairlight out. I had to buy it. I could claim it back as expenses. But I was literally shaking in the Apple store, spending, what was it, £600, I think, for that first iPad. Literally shaking to hand over that money. Oh God. But I think too much about a lot of things. I tend to go on gut feelings. If I really want something like the Dx7 or the Dx5, then I don't have much of a problem. But when it comes to things that maybe I could do without, do I really need it? I just get I end up talking myself out of buying it. Christopher Gill says, I had an Ensoniq Mirage DSK1 back in the day and loved it. Have you ever owned or used one? No. I'm not DSK1. I'm not familiar with that. And the Mirage, is it just a Mirage? Because I remember the Mirage, and actually no, I have used a Mirage. If it's just a regular Mirage, I was playing in a band in the late 80s, and we had a keyboard player who was our bass player. So we didn't have a regular bass guitarist. We had Mike, who's sadly no longer with us. And Mike played. He had a Casio CZ. I want to say it was the big one. What was that? Was that the one? It's just the CZ1 or the 5000? That seems to. I want to say 5000. I don't know. Anyway. So he had one of those, and he had a Juno 106. So left hand on the Casio doing bass stuff, right hand doing chords on the Juno, and then we were joined by a guy called Richard Bainbridge, or Dickie Bainbridge, who used to play with Elton John, Screaming Lord Sutch, and a few other sort of classic English rock artists and blues people. And he joined our band, and he was a flautist and a saxophonist. That's why we wanted him. But he also was a keyboard player, and he had an Ensoniq Mirage, and he had samples, and I used to love messing around with that. And we had a drum machine that we kind of sequenced sometimes, the Casio RZ1, and I used to love messing around with the sampling features on that, limited as they were. So yeah, if that's the same thing. Because the DSK1 suffix, I'm not too familiar with Ensoniqs, but yeah, they had a very distinctive sound, didn't they? Was it 12-bit, 10 or 12-bit sampling? But yeah, very, very nice. Let's keep going through. Chris says, don't like subscriptions, but the Roman Cloud does sound really good. That's kind of where I'm coming from. Wagyu says, System 8 is lovely. Weird how the native engine is often better than the classic. It emulates very well. This is true. It's what I've been hearing. Again, Chris backs that up, you know. System 8 gets a pretty good write-up from most people. Asio Head says, I don't mind subs, but the problem is they're all only X euros, but it all starts adding up, and often you end up with nothing. Yeah, it's going like that with TV, isn't it? You know, I've just got Disney Plus because my son was going Disney Plus, watch The Mandalorian, and I kind of wanted to watch The Mandalorian too. And they did that offer where it was just like, you know, £50 for 1 year rather than 60. I thought, oh, 50 quid, that's a bit more reasonable. We'll give it a go. So we've got that. I've got Apple TV Plus because I bought my wife an iPad for Christmas, and we got 3 years Apple TV subscription. So I've got that, but that will cost however much it does. I've already got Netflix. I've already got Amazon Prime. I've got BT Sport. And you think, you add all of these up, and Jesus, how much am I paying for stuff that, I don't know. How often do we watch it? Although nowadays with like wall-to-wall coronavirus on like every channel, we're watching it a lot because it's just doing my head in. I don't really need to know unless there's something that directly affects me, like, you know, you're going into lockdown and shit. I don't need to know. You know, just tell me when, you know, I'll get a headline pop up, but I don't want to keep hearing about it. Back to the cloud. So Marshall says, yeah, it's good value, always adding to the lineup of synths, but yeah, and I like the fact that they do seem to be continuously adding stuff up, but he does prefer to buy a bundle like the Arturia V collection. I must say I was a bit reticent about the V collection, and then I got it. I thought, yeah, this is good. And I'm on version 7, and you know, I've been on, I think I started at 5, 6 and 7 now. So I do like that. A lot. And it's not very hasn't got a large footprint on your hard drive, you know, apart from the sample based stuff. Pretty much, I put it on my MacBook. I've only got 128 gig SSD on my MacBook, so I don't have everything on there, but I put the V collection on there. It's not bad. So I was trying to Sasquatch said, not a fan of Apple either, don't like closed systems. Is it a closed? I mean, yes, it is a kind of closed system. No, it's not. It's not a closed system. You can develop for it. Yeah, all right. So the hardware is, unless you go for the Mac Pro, and then of course you're paying megabucks. I mean, I was 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. I was like, you mentioned Apple to me, I'd laugh. I was, you know, as far as my mobile devices, I was Nokia all the way. I had, you know, always had the top of the range Nokia mobile until the iPhone came out, and then the iPhone came out, and you know, it seemed almost like more of a toy than a phone, and it wouldn't pair with my Bluetooth in my car. I tried a friend's one, and it just wouldn't do it. Whereas my Nokia was just like seamless. You know, I had no problems with that. But then Nokia tried to compete and failed miserably. And then by the time I had to work on the iOS CMI app, I had to get one. Luckily, I didn't pay for it. But when I got it, I was like, oh, no, I kind of get this now. This actually does work very nicely. And ever since, I've been an Apple convert. They've got me. So we've all got iPhones in the house, because that has a benefit of sharing stuff and being able to, you know, keep an eye on the kids. And we've got 2 iMacs, 4 Apple TVs. All my network hardware around the house is Apple Extreme, you know, airports and what have you. What else have we got? Well, the kids have got iPads. The wife's got an iPad. I've got an old iPad. Don't really use. I've got 2 really old iPads I don't really use. And I've got the MacBook. So yeah, we're kind of like an Apple family. And it works. It really works for us. The whole ecosystem. I think if you buy into the ecosystem, it all just works very nicely together. And I've always been a big fan of that kind of interconnectivity and being able to do stuff. My kids can't buy anything in the App Store without my approval, so I like that kind of control. Also, I can use it for tracking them when they don't turn it into airplane mode when they're at school. So that's a useful aspect of it. The fact that between us we can share all of the apps that I buy, whether it's I bought Logic for my Mac. My son gets it on his iMac and doesn't have to pay a penny for it. So that's nice. So there's a lot that it can do, and this. I don't want to get into an Apple versus PC or Windows argument because I will beat you. No. So yes, it's expensive. It costs more. This thing here, this iMac, costs way more than any Windows PC I ever bought. But this is a late 2013 iMac, and the only thing I've done to it is put 32 gig of RAM in there, and I'm going to shortly, once I can get it into, once I can leave the home, I'm going to take it in and have an SSD put in. And it's still, it hasn't even got a Fusion drive. It's just got a regular hard drive in there, and it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I do all sorts of stuff on it, and it's really not stressing at all. But this is a late 2013 model, so this technology in this thing is about 7 years old. Now, I remember when I had a PC, I was updating hardware components. I'll put a new video card in every few years because I needed to, or a new sound card, or a new this, or maybe some more RAM. I was always having to kind of keep it up by buying stuff. I've never had to do that with this. Even my son's iMac, which is a 2006 iMac, is still perfectly usable for everything he needs to use it for. So I really I don't get this. I understand why people say they're expensive compared to PCs, but the return on investment is greater with a Mac. Certainly, that's my experience. But we could go off on that, and I don't want to because they're silly arguments. You use what you use because you like it. It does what I'm not going to try and change your mind. So there you go. Let's go back to the comments before we get aggressive. Wagyu says he had a Yamaha VSS 30 at school. Can you see that over there? The VSS 200, which was my first sampler. Not that one. I'd sold the other one and then managed to get one back. So there we go. Chris Gill says, I think the DSK one was similar to the first models but had more plastic rather than a full metal case. All right, okay. Yeah, because I remember that the Mirage was it was like a lot of the Yamaha stuff is metal. It's great. It's fantastic, just heavy. So yeah, the Mirage was 8-bit with Curtis filters. Yeah, that's true. Wagyu says, download torrents from Private Track if you need to watch Mandalorian. Yeah, I like to pay. That's just a moral thing. But I'm not saying but Pirate Bay is very friendly. Is that still going? Honestly, I don't know. I just thought that they'd stopped it, or they'd hassled it enough for it to go out. Wagyu says, I have an ASR 10 that he needs to set up properly. Mark Doty loves his ASR 10. Keeps telling me. I've never tried. David Vorhaus has got one. I'm going to have a look when I next go over to his studio. He's got all sorts of really weird stuff. Azio says, I checked the Rowan Cloud for the Juno. Now I heard the JU06A. I think I'm going to get that. The JU06, I've not played it, but I've heard people complain the fact that it's 4-note polyphonic, where the hardware was 6. And I had the JP08, the Jupiter 8 thing, 4-voice. How dare you recreate an 8-voice polyphonic synth and only give it 4-voice? And then in the instruction manual, have the audacity to say, if you want the full Jupiter 8 experience, pair another JP08 with this one. No, mate, I want an 8-voice synthesizer. So I got very kind of angry with Roland at that one. I thought that was a bit cheeky. Wagyu says he was using an HTC Windows Mobile back then, remote desktop and multitasking, pretty cool. Yeah, I was a massive Symbian operating system fan. With Nokia's kind of OS of choice for their devices. I loved Symbian, really good. Marshall says super excited when Arturia added the synclavier. Yeah, and I think their interpretation of the synclavier, which has been done in conjunction with Cameron, the guy that invented the synclavier, they've focused on the FM bit and they've done it really well, and they've got the original guy in to do a lot of that, so got a lot of time for that. Chris Gill says, it couldn't happen here by the Pet Shop Boys. It's one of the best Series 3 tracks I've heard. What do I think? I agree, and I have the original Series 3 files for that here, and so on occasion, I don't often play it in public because Neil Tennant is very precious of that stuff, but yes, I have it. It was programmed into the Series 3 by Blue Weaver, and I've spoken to Blue about it, and he's told me about some of the things he had to do to get that, because it was, now let me get this right, it was a co-write between Ennio Morricone, who's a hero of mine anyway, and the Pet Shop Boys, and then it was arranged by Badalamenti, the guy that did the Twin Peaks stuff. So it's just got these brilliant names attached to it, and then Blue Weaver had to program it into a Series 3 using the RS sequencer in there, and it is pretty amazing. When I first loaded it up and just pressed play, it was just like, oh my god, it's missing a lot of effects, obviously. It was just the stuff, but it is incredible. So yes, I do think it's one of the best Series 3 tracks. I mean, that whole album actually is so much Series 3. Let's get through. Sasquatch says, still keep images for old Windows versions. Yep, I do. In fact, I've actually got a couple of laptops. I bought a laptop specifically to use with the Emacs. Excuse me. And it's an old enterprise level Dell laptop, so it's chunky as heck. And the keys on it are really solid. It's kind of industrial strength Dell laptop, ex-British Telecom, and the guy sold it to me for like 40 quid, and it's got removable drives, it's got a removable 3.5-inch floppy, it's got a removable DVD drive, it's got a removable LS120, do you remember those drives? It's got one of those, two batteries, all in tip-top condition. It's really good. So yeah, I keep that around, and I do have some images on here that I use with VirtualBox. But I prefer to have like a dedicated piece of hardware rather than virtual stuff. It's just easier for me. Wagyu says, on my last trip to the UK, I found a scratch pad book of mine where I'd cut out pictures of the VSS 200 from the Argos cow. I used to work for Argos. I worked for Argos for 10 years, and one of my favourite things at Argos was to when it was quiet, because I used to work up in the warehouse, used to get the top of the range PSR and PSS keyboards and play with them, and then repackage them up and resellotape the boxes. I never found out. In the Blink says, hey friend, have you ever uploaded the stuff that came in your Fairlight somewhere? I'd love to check it out. No. Simple reason, it's all pretty much copyrighted. So without going into huge amounts of detail, we are very fortunate in the position we are to be allowed to acquire and keep some of this material. But if we ever made that publicly available, we would get sued to hell. So sorry, can't do that. I mean, I was going to try. I was hoping that I might be able to get permission to do that Pet Shop Boys track at the Synthfest seminar last year, but I just couldn't get permission to do it. They just wouldn't. So it's unfortunate. But I hate to kind of be the tease, but we have some gold here. It's just some of it's just amazing. It's an incredible privilege, and it's not something I take lightly, and I'd love to share it if I could, even if it's just like a recording of it. and just to show you how it was created. But it's unfortunate I can't, so I won't, because I can't afford to be sued by the likes of some of the people's material that we have. Asio says, yeah, forgot about the polyphony. Yeah, I'm sorry, but if you're going to have a Jupiter 8 recreation, clone, whatever you want to call it, it's got to be at least 8-note polyphonic, at least. But it's 4, and that's, I mean, the fact that the JU06 is 4, not 6, slightly less of an issue, but it's still an issue if you ask me. Because when I play chords and stuff, and I'm not really a great keyboard player, but when I play chords, then I play usually 1 or 2, like an octave root, and then 3 or 4 notes up here, just to get that kind of. Let's see if we've got a patch here. No. Here we go. So this is my DX7. Now you see there's notes dropping out already because this is only 8-note polyphonic. But that frustrates the hell out of me. It's 8-note polyphonic, but it's used in performance mode, so it doubles up on certain things. But yeah, if you're going to play 8 notes, if you're going to replicate an 8-note polyphonic synthesizer, at least give it 8-note polyphony. Wagyu says the Roland polychain doesn't work. It's overflow, so you need to play 5+ notes to trigger the second synth, and then it steals voices for subsequent stuff. Yeah, no, give me the software. If I'm going to have those, just give me the software. And people wonder why the DeepMind 12 sold so well. Exactly. I can't. There's a lot of Behringer love and hate. Again, they're a very Marmite company, but the DeepMind's a great synth. There's no two ways about it. And Torsten agrees. Sasquatch agrees. Asio Head says DeepMind would sell even more if there wasn't so much snobbery. This is very true. Very true indeed. It really is a very good. I would love Behringer. I don't want to get into too much of a Behringer thing, but I would love Behringer to do more DeepMind stuff. Please, enough with the clones. Limit the clones to maybe just a handful a year or two, but come on. You've got some great guys working for you now. You've got that Italian chap, you've got the British guy that's behind the ARP 2600 stuff. Please, come up with something original. You can do it. You absolutely can do it. And when you did it, everyone was like, whoa, respect. You've come up with something that's pretty much an original thing. So there you go. Simon says Blue Weaver, very talented guy. He is. He's a very, very talented man, and very honoured to call him a friend. Have I checked out the Bogner-Meyer Zuschrader files for the Series 2 from Virtual Music? I don't know those names, so I'm going to have to say no. More information, please. Marshall Arnold, good old BT. I worked for BT Conferencing for a few years. Well. What a small world. I worked for BT for 2 years, about just over 2 years. I'd been made redundant. So I used to work for Gateway Computers, the American computer company over here, and we got laid off just after. No, it was just before 9/11. It was July of 2001. They laid us all off for lots of reasons we won't go into. And so for the next few years, I was just kind of bouncing around jobs until I could get back into training roles. And I did a couple of really crap jobs, and I ended up working at BT for the BT Wholesale, or directories, in fact. An interesting company to work for. I'm going to heart on sleeve here. I'm a socialist. I'm a democratic socialist politically. BT is a company that's still entrenched in the union culture, except it's a private company. It was a public company owned by the government for many, many years, or the GPO, and then it was sold off, privatized. And here's a private company that's all about shares and all that kind of stuff, payouts to shareholders and all this kind of stuff. But yet the workforce managed to hang on to a lot of their union gained rights and practices. I mean, the days off structure there is insane. But yeah, it's a very interesting company to work for. James says, I keep an old laptop for the same thing. Omniflop works on it, which is brilliant for Atari. Yeah, exactly. I use Omniflop. I use the EMXP software for getting emulator 2 sounds into the Emacs and other sounds and stuff. So it's a really useful machine just to have for messing around with that. Native VS says, I've been trying to bug a friend to see if there are some of the old Mike Oldfield files in the Endinclang archive. Erdinclang, sorry. That would be interesting. Yeah, he was a good user. But say, I've never... That name doesn't ring a bell. I'd be interested to know some more details of where I can find information about these archives. In the Blink says, understand. Well, yes, this is to reference to do I publish anything. Just remember seeing you had the San Jacinto sequence. That's correct, yeah. So, yeah, we've got some of the Gabriel stuff, but there's really nothing of huge worth there. Basically, I think what we've got, Simon might be able to clarify. What we've got is stuff that was sampled into Series 3 format for one of the tours, and I can't remember whether it was Secret World. I think that might have been Beyond, but he did some tours, and so he sampled some stuff into there. So I think that's kind of the stuff that we've got. What tends to happen is if we acquire one of these Fairlights from a big name, obviously they say to us what we can and can't do with what's on the hard drive, and a lot of the time they want it converted and backing up, so we do that. And then we do kind of say, oh, go on, can we? And they'll sort of say, well, you can have that, but it's for your personal consumption only, but you can't have any of that. So it kind of works, but we have to respect it, because if we don't get their business. Simon says, can't remember. It's the DX11 small keys, DX21, or other way round. No, so the DX11 and the DX21 are both 61 note full size keys. The DX100 was the mini keys version. The DX21 is kind of the first generation of those 4-op DX synths. So you had the DX9, the DX21, the DX27, the DX100, and there was a DX27S which had speakers in. The DX21 was the better of those because it featured the layers and splits, I think, that the 27 and the 100 and the 9 didn't have. The DX11 is basically a DX21 update. It's a TX81Z engine, so it's 4-operator, but you have layers and splits and performances. You also have effects, and I say effects as pseudo effects. So the delay is a MIDI delay. The reverb is just let's extend the release on the patch rather than it being an actual. It has got no effects processing. It's a kind of pseudo effects, which is why you get lots of note dropouts, because it's just using MIDI channels. And the other thing with the DX11, like the TX81Z, is it features the 8 waveforms. So rather than just having the sine wave, it's got this whole selection of 8 waveforms that you can use in your operators. So you get a much more richer kind of sound. So it's a really nice synth, but it's just 8-note polyphonic. That's the only thing I don't like about it. But it's great for basses and stuff. Really good. In the Blink says, wait until they clone the Prophet 5, then they can stop. Oh, I see. So that's your cut-off point. That's what you want. Okay. They might do. I'm not saying. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I don't want to kind of get into the whole Behringer thing, because it sparks some nasty stuff. And I'm pretty sure most of you people are really nice. So, where are we? Wagyu says he loves the clones, but definitely needs a mix of DM12, Neutron. Yeah. So I've got an MS-101, and I like it. It's not it's not my most favourite synth in the world, but it's a really nice synth, and I like the fact that it's a genuine single oscillator analog, really nice and simple to use, and get some really great sounds out of it. Happy bunny, I just think this kind of... I don't think I disagree with Behringer as much, or Behringer doesn't piss me off as much as the people that go on about Behringer. That you've got this massive kind of collection of people that flag waving, chest thumping supporters of Behringer and fuck everyone else. How dare we? I'm a gear snob. I've been called it by Behringer people, Behringer fans. I'm because I've got a Fairlight and I've got a Dx7 and I've got nice stuff, and they can't have that. So why shouldn't they be able to have their Behringer stuff? What Behringer do, if it doesn't break any laws, it might be morally questionable. But hey, if you want to protect your stuff, protect it. It's the people that really are beginning to annoy me a lot. But there we go. So I like Behringer gear. This broadcast, the audio from this broadcast is coming through a Behringer mixer. I'm speaking on a Behringer microphone, which is really nice for this kind of thing. And I have an MS-101. I've got another Behringer mixer somewhere else. I've had bits of Behringer gear. I don't have a problem with using Behringer gear. Although, when I saw what they did with the whole Peter Curtin thing, I started to question that. Because that was shitty. There's no two ways about it. That was a shitty thing to do. The video, the copywriting of the name, shitty thing to do. But there we go. We'll leave that there. He says, I know there's a lag here, so I'm sure we'll get some comments soon. I'm just trying to go through here. I think Behringer are filling the bank account and will move more up market. And that's a theory that's often posited, that they are building up funds, although he's not short of a few quid, let's be honest. Native VS says Bognemeyer and Zuschrader I know that name, worked on Discovery with Mike Oldfield and did the Erden Klang album. These names are beginning to ring bells. Maybe I do know, I don't know. I'll have to investigate. Marsh says, yes, Small World. I worked there between 2012 and 2014. I worked there between 2014 and 2016. Yeah, it was those 2 years. So we missed each other. But there you go. Yeah, Marsh says, yeah, had tons of vacation. Yeah, they do. They've kept all of their Union 1 days off. Which is incredible. It really is. But they couldn't have done it without it. I'm sure that they will force those out at some point, once all the old Union-based guys have gone the way of the dinosaur. Go through. In the link says probably Secret World Live. Yeah, that's what I think it was. So I think it was that tour the Peter Gabriel samples that we have here probably were created for that tour. He also asked, I say he or she, I don't know, in the blink, I can't tell. They also asked, just curious, have you played with the Arturia CMIV? Curious on your thoughts since you have so much experience with the real deal. I do, I absolutely do. And I think, an actual fact, and I think there are many, I was speaking to my producer friend in LA who has 2 or 3 Fairlights. I think he's got a Series 1, a Series 2 and a Series 3. And he's a massive advocate and a fan of the Fairlight, obviously. But he said to me the other day, he says, I'm increasingly finding myself just using the Arturia plugin. Just because it's convenient and gets me the sounds quickly. And then later on, if I want to, I can come back and use the real deal if I need to. But yes, I have. Let me just zoom there. So there it is, just there. That's the thing. I haven't got the MIDI set up on that, but yes, I do have it, and I do like it. It's an interesting recreation. If you want all the factory sounds, it absolutely ticks that box. It doesn't model the hardware, which is understandable. And a lot of the features were not there. A lot of the features in the plugin are not on the real deal. But if you want an idea of how it worked, and you want it's good, and it sounds great. It does sound very good. And I think personally that's probably the best it'll get. And I don't think anybody really wants much more than that. Really, certainly you wouldn't want. So here's the thing. So let me just. I'm going to really minimise myself now and put myself in the corner. So let me just bring that here. So you might have heard about this if you follow me around in various places. So this is a thing called Quasar Beach, and it's developed by a guy in Scotland, and it is a recreation, not a model. There's no original code in here. This is a recreation of the Fairlight operating system. And so you can see that it has all the pages, and there's some additional pages in here compared to the real deal. So I'm looking over here because I've got my second monitor. So things like FX Bus, that wasn't in the original thing. Sound previews and stuff. Page R, obviously, that's there, and that works exactly just like Page R works. The functionality is identical. He's replicated it all. He hasn't copied a thing. He's literally built this from scratch. So you have your index, you have your disk control. So this is obviously different. It looks similar to the way the original Fairlight worked, but you can click on a folder here. I haven't got anything in that one at the moment, I don't think. No, because it's going straight there. But you can open up original VC files. You can do all of that stuff. It will also import other old sampler type files, and you've got the harmonic profiles where you can draw in waveforms if you want to, and then play those back, and you can do all sorts of different things there. Obviously you've got your sampling page, that's very similar to the real thing. Waveform displays, so you get your 3D perspective waveform display. So it really is, and it works with you've got a virtual MIDI keyboard that you can play, which obviously wasn't on the original. You can configure it to use MIDI, so you've got all of that in there. But yeah, it's really good, and it's completely free. And I showed it to Peter Vogel, and he was incredibly impressed. So much so that he struck up a kind of a relationship with the developer. So you never know what we might see. So there you go. If you want it, it's I can put the link into the chat. Let me go and grab that. So it's completely free to download, along with all the instruction files. So let me just grab that and put that in the chat room. So there you go. Have a play. Let's see if we can catch up, because you guys have been talking a lot. So that's where we were. Okay. So a lot of you are talking to each other here. Angel Star Scotland. Oh, it's Mark Barnes. I'm assuming it's Mark, and yeah, it is Mark, isn't it? Angel Star, yeah. Likes the sound of the TX81Z, nightmare to program. Yeah. It's even worse than the actual Dx11 to program, obviously, because it's a 1U rack unit. So yeah, not very nice. So something like Patchbase would be very useful to program that. James Bennett says, I bought a TX81Z a couple of years ago, loaded the G-Storm Electro patches onto it. Sounds great, but haven't put the time into learning to edit it properly yet. Here's a recommendation. So Great Sounds, who have a long-held reputation of producing sample libraries for various, and patch libraries for various synthesizers over 30 odd years. They have an eBay store, and I just bought their TX81Z package, which is a 9-disc library. So you can buy it as a download, so you just get the SysX. But if you want the floppy disks, you can have floppy disks as well. And it's 9 banks of TX81Z patches that also obviously work in the Dx11, but also the performances as well. And there's some spectacular sounds in there. So, the great thing with FM is that there's a huge amount of presets out there because it was so difficult to program. So, great sounds. GREYTSOUNDS. Great sounds. Look for them on eBay. They do all manner of kind of vintage patch libraries. Some really good stuff in there. So I'll give them a plug because they've been really good to me. James says he did a battery change and a ROM update. Yeah, always advisable. I did that on my TX7. I've got to do it on the Dx5 because I'm one version behind the final version on the OS, and I need to change. Well, I need to change the battery. It's still at like 2.8 volts on the original battery from 1985. So I've got a little while yet, but it's always good to do it and not have to worry about it. Wagyu says, if Behringer hadn't brought back these synths, basically no bugger would have, aside from small fan projects. This is true. I mean, if you look back through history, there have been clones of classic synthesizers since people have been making synthesizers, basically. In the 90s, there was a ton of stuff, and nobody batted an eyelid. Nobody got all high and mighty about it. But Behringer seemed to attract a particular type of ire from the synth buying public. There you go. Sasquatch says, what are morals? This is true nowadays, sadly. Native VS says, I'd love to see the Behringer Fairlight. That's an interesting thought. I'm not kind of sure how they would do that. If you're going to clone a Fairlight, I don't think there's legs in that financially. I really don't, unless they're able to accurately clone the hardware processes of the original, which we know are difficult to do. We explained that earlier on in the string. So you need some expensive hardware to do it properly. But anyway, to be honest, I don't know who Mr. Kern is, but yes, it was stupid. No need for it. Yeah. And then Sasquatch says Kern is a snob, though. Well, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one. No, he's not what I would call a snob. He doesn't dismiss completely out of hand any of this stuff. He calls into question some of it from a moral perspective or from a quality perspective, and he has every right to do so. What they did to him in copyrighting his name, knowing full well that he's in the synthesizer manufacturing business himself on a very small scale, and although none of his hardware bears his name, what they were proposing to copyright was the use of his name in the manufacture of synthesizers. So he couldn't, if that had gone through, he would not have been able to market his synthesizer by saying, "Hi, I'm Peter Kern and I'm responsible for this." That's a pretty crappy thing to do, I think. So whether you think he's a snob or not, and I guess that's just a matter of opinion. What they did was just completely uncalled for. And then there's the video, and we're not going to go into that. That's been done. I'm so glad that the world has stopped talking about that damn video. So Asio Head says he's not afraid to voice his opinion on a popular online forum, so you can expect reactions. That's very true. Remember Martin Gore's Casio with Fairlight, Lite? Yes, I do. They really didn't like it, and then they went to the Synclavier, which I think at the time probably made sense, more sense to them, but it still suffered from issues. So I think it was 6 of one and half a dozen the other. Asio Head says, anyone into the Orb, by the way, they got a new album called Abolition of the Royal Familia. I didn't know about that until today when I saw something in my Discogs feed that album is coming out, so I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I'm not a massive fan, but I appreciate them. So yeah, I'll check that out. I think actually this month's edition of Electronic Sound here, if you want snobbery, electronic music snobbery, this magazine smells lovely. This is proper electronic music snobbery. But yes, they're on there this week, and it comes with 7-inch, which good old vinyl, contains Hawk Kings and Golden Clouds on there. So that's current release of that. Marshall and Mark are having a good conversation about the wave state. I'd like to have a go with that. Excuse me. Are we up to, where are we? Simon says, I must look at the Arturia plugin. I haven't, primarily because of snobbery, and I'm also a purist. I couldn't possibly say, mate. Now, I know you're definitely a purist. I will give you that, and that's not a bad thing at all. I wouldn't say you're a snob. You are someone who is in a very fortunate position, one that you have thoroughly earned, that you're able to enjoy those finer things in synthesizer life. And so therefore, why would you bother with a plugin? But yeah, it's worth having a look. It really is, definitely. I'll bring the laptop over and you can have a play. So lots of kind of internal conversations here. I also have the Arturia Fairlight, want to explore it, but so far haven't, says Wagyu. It is. It's a nice thing, you know. They've done it really well from a sampling perspective. Obviously, it doesn't completely model the hardware. There is, you know, they've got some filter modeling going on there, but it's not the same. But like I said, you know, bottom line is you're not going to hear a huge amount of difference in the mix. So, but yeah, it's done really nicely, and they've kind of expanded on the concept. And you know, so their Page R is 32 track, I think. So obviously that's, you know, 4 times what was available. But it kind of works in a nicer way. They've kind of cleaned it up and made it a bit more easy to navigate. They've also got their kind of variation of the FFT synthesis aspect and the resampling, which wasn't really a thing. And because the FFT stuff in the Fairlight was literally just, it was like the appendix from the Quasar. They really wanted it to be the centre feature piece of the Fairlight, but the sampling was where everyone was at. So yeah, if I would, you know, I recommend it. You know, a lot of people say to me, you know, sample library, whatever, and I said no, go for the Arturia plugin. It's affordable, it's good quality, you'll get updates, and if you get it in V Collection, it's a really good package. Why don't we work with light pens today? It does seem amazing, says Asio Head. Interesting point. I mean, we do in a way with styluses. Here's a thing that I only discovered a couple of years ago. So I didn't do much work at all on the CMI30A. I was just kind of more promotional stuff around that. But somebody contacted me via email a short, you know, about a year or two ago, and said, are you still in touch with Peter Vogel? Because I've got a CMI30A and the cable that attaches the light pen to the monitor is beginning to fray around the connector where it connects at the top of the monitor. Now, what Peter did when he recreated the Fairlight in this 30A incarnation, he didn't use an old cathode ray tube monitor. It was a flat screen LCD monitor. And I remember him saying to me, he says, I've cracked it, Rob. I've been able to come up with a light pen that works with this TFT monitor. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because I didn't think that was necessarily possible or easy to do. So anyway, didn't really think much more of it. This guy contacts me, says he's got this cable, and all he wants to do is just buy a replacement cable because he's worried that it will eventually fray and snap, and then his light pen won't work. So I emailed Peter and I said, I've had this guy, blah blah blah, light pen cable. Do you have spares? Are they, is it something that's off the shelf or was it custom? And he says, I won't do the accent, but he says, just tell him, cut it in half with a pair of scissors and try and using it. I said, why would he do that? He said, because it will still work. So I said, well, what's the cable for? He said, it's just a tether. That's all it is. It's just a tether. It's made to look like it's supposed to. All this is a Wacom tablet screen, one of those kind of screen tablets that artists use, and that's how he did it. It's a Wacom tablet screen with their stylus, and that's all it is. Genius. So yeah, why don't we still work with light pens? I guess in some way we do. The Apple Pencil is kind of like a sort of light penny thing. There was a guy, wasn't there, who built a Fairlight around his iPad, so he kind of got a 37 or 49 key controller, built a white box to go around it, built a mock-up of the VDU, and then put his iPad in it, and then used just one of those touch styluses as his light pen. And it looked a little bit odd, but fair play, it kind of worked. So very clever. Wagyu says, I built a light pen for my ZX Spectrum, wow, by buying parts from Maplins. Maplins, they're long gone, haven't they? Used it to cheat on the Bullseye darts game. Oh, Bullseye. I'm a bit of bully. Blimey. So where are us? I've just lost the thread of the thread. Native VS says, I've been looking to get a relatively cheap TX816 for quite a while now. Good luck with that. There's one at the moment on eBay. Let me have a look. Because I've got my eye on it myself, but it's far too much money. But I got one of those messages, the seller is offering you an exclusive discount on this TX. It's a fully spec'd TX816. Come on. There we go. Unless it's sold. Oh no, there it is. So it's currently selling for $1,095, which is, according to eBay, about £929. But I've got an offer. It might have run out actually, for a discount of some amount, about 10%, I think. So I can have it for about $900. Yeah, $995, I think. So that works out just under 900. It's about 800 and something pounds, which I'm afraid is still. It's still too much. I would absolutely love one. There's a video on YouTube, surprisingly, of a guy that's playing the same riff, the same electric piano riff, and he starts off with one module and then builds up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then eventually gets to 8. It just sounds stunning. It's just amazing. I still get very moist about the gusset about that. Some clone talk there. We shan't get into that. The Peter Kernberger thing was just pure. Definitely. Light pens worked using these scan lines, so they don't work on. Yeah, so that's why I was dubious about when he did that. So he used the Wacom tablet. Mark's talking to Marshall here in the chat about the wave state, saying it takes a bit to get your head around, and I get that impression when I look at some of the videos about it. But I wouldn't mind having a go. I want to get one of these new wave table-y synths, and I think the Argon 8 is going to be the one I probably end up going with, for a number of reasons. But yeah. Richard says, as tonal access in the chat room, are you still talking, Rob? Come on, mate, you know me. Of course I am. I don't even know what we're up to at the moment, what terms of things. Does the Arturia Fairlight have the Compander option? Compander option, as well as some of the other rarer hardware options. Can you explain the Compander option? That's not a term I'm familiar with. Native VS, yeah. If you can, Compander, is it? You're talking about audio, like multiple inputs into one? Is that, or what? Yeah. So if you can explain, and I can then say yes or no. But there are touchscreens for PC. Just Apple refused to add touch support to OS X. I think that's coming, Wagyu. I really do. I think that the new iPad, which apparently in many cases outperforms some certain MacBooks. I think we're. I think there's. I would say if you were lucky enough to see Apple's roadmap, I'd say you would see some touchscreen technology in the desktop space or the laptop space pretty soon. Something will converge, especially if they're going to making their own processors for everything. We shall see. Interesting stuff. Wagyu says sounds a good price. I'm assuming that's the TX81Z. It's probably a fair price for one of those, because they are beasts. It's 8 DX7s in a box. So the sonic capabilities, the power of that thing. I mean, back in the day it was an absolute beast. Nowadays, just 8 instances of Dx7 and you've got the same thing. Really, you just have to go in and tune each one. To get that effect, you need to especially with if you're using the same patches, detune and pan each a little bit differently. So yeah, there you go. Jez says I spy an Emax too. Correct. Yep, at the back there. Loved mine and its fabulous sounding filters. Yeah, the Emax 2's filters aren't quite as nice as because they're digital filters, but they're good digital filters. But they're not quite as nice as the Emax 1 or the Emulator 2. Because the Emax 2 is kind of like the budget Emulator 3, so to speak. But yes, I love it. I think it's really a lovely sampler to it because it's immediate and it has a lovely, it has that emu sound to it, and it's. I'm still on the lookout for the kind of higher spec version because that's the base model that can't really be expanded on. Ideally, one day I'd like to get an Emulator 2. That's my ambition. But they come up rarely and they're usually very expensive. Some absolute tosh as well. Oh, sorry, here we go. It also had another interesting feature called Transform Multiplication, which used to produce some fabulous sounds and some absolute tosh as well. Sorry, I kind of... Yeah. Is there a modern plugin that does that same thing? I don't. So there was the Emulator X software plugin, which was a really good plugin, and I had Emulator X too, and then they did version 3 and wanted some stupid upgrade price, and it was Windows only, and I was Windows based at the time, and I resented paying that amount of money again, and so I didn't. So I can't remember if it had that on there. I'm not aware of anything that does something similar. Oh, we're almost catched up here. It took several lifetimes to process 2 sounds on the Emax, and it strikes me that modern computer power would do that in a heartbeat. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know if there is anything like that elsewhere. Wagyu says $192 postage is difficult to swallow. Yeah, because it's in the States, isn't it? Yeah, it's in Fairport in New York. So yeah, and that's another thing that would put me off. Because it's shipping, the shipping cost, and the fact that you've got to entrust £1,000 synthesizer to some courier, but also tax, and finally voltage. So I can't remember if the TX816 has an adjustable voltage input. I'm just having a look. Doesn't appear to have adjustable voltage in there. No, it's 120 volt fixed. So you'd have to get a transformer, which is another box that's generating heat in the room, and something else to go wrong. So yeah, it's a shame. But there you go. Does anyone criticise Korg for using a Raspberry Pi for the wave state? That's a really good point. I was a little bit surprised, but not in a bad way, when I saw that. So I think it's great. I mean, it's obviously not the standard Raspberry Pi. It's the I forget what they call it now. It's kind of the industrialized version. So it's built for companies to buy and put into mass production machines. So it's a probably a more trusted and stable version. But I thought, hey, why not? If it can do the job, it does the job. I don't care whether there's a Raspberry Pi in it or not. And I think it actually says something to other developers saying, look, Korg are using Raspberry Pis, so we can do stuff that's very similar. I mean, but at the end of the day, most synthesizers have, nowadays have a kind of a little computer board in there with some custom code going on. Whether the processor is a Shark processor or an ARM processor or a Raspberry Pi thing, that's it, the compute model. It's by the by. I just think people were kind of taken aback that the Raspberry Pi is often touted as this kind of domestic consumer product, and here it is in a professional synthesizer. And I think, well, good luck to them. They've clearly, tested it and made it into something, hopefully something that works really well. I know some people were questioning it, saying that there was reliability issues with the regular Raspberry Pi, but the compute module is built for industrialization, from what I've read. So, and I think Korg would be rather naive in releasing something like this if if the board itself was unstable. Only time will tell. But no, I'm quite impressed that they've done that, and they don't seem to be. They're not promoting it, but they're certainly not shying away from it. And as Wagyu says, it could be a very easy to replace brain. If these things do go, then it's easy to do. It's widely available. Asio says a lot of modules are based on the Teensy. Yeah, and that's true. I've seen that. Teensy boards in various things. I really love this kind of thing, because go back to what we were talking about at the very top of the stream, was these new memory cartridges for old synthesizers, and this whole business that we've got the HXC floppy drive emulator in the Series 2. We use the SCSI to SD drives in the Series 3s. This use of technology to emulate these old things properly, and therefore give us really good options to keep these machines running for many years to come. I think it's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So yeah, Teensy, Raspberry Pi, all those other ones. I really must get into it one day, but I'm not hugely familiar with it all. But great, all power to them. Oh yes, and Native VS says there was an article series in ENMM, that mentioned the compressor option to give the 2X more dynamic range, like the Companders. Oh right, okay. It's not something I'm aware of. I mean, the Series 2s weren't, certainly beyond the computer section, which sits behind that front panel. So that's the CPUs, the voice cards, and then the computer cards that handle the MIDI and the disk communications and stuff. Beyond that, on the Series 2, there's very little that you can, certainly from a user perspective, change or upgrade, because unlike the Series 3, on the rear of the machine it's all fixed. The audio section is kind of fixed, so you would need to get into it at a very deep level to make changes. It's not something. Whereas the Series 3 was very modular. You had two card cages. You had the computer cage at the front, which is very similar to the Series 2. You had your memory, your voice cards, your central processor, your SCSI cards, your disk I/O cards, your graphics cards, your MIDI cards. They're all at the front, and then at the back you have the audio card cage. So every channel has a separate channel output card. There's audio inputs for sampling, audio outputs from all the channels. You've got MIDI, SMPTE, all of that stuff goes on the back plane of the system. So you could very easily upgrade, and there were certainly different versions of the channel output cards with different filters and op amps and stuff that you could upgrade to, or certainly just buy better ones. But with the Series 2, I don't think that. See, the problem again with Fairlight is their marketing department often promise things that never existed. You know, there was a big marketing campaign around producing a 32 voice Series 3 because the original was 16, and the plan was that you bought this kind of add-on box that gave you the extra 16 channels, kind of like a polychain thing, I guess. Turns out that doing that would have cost more than buying 2 Series 3s, so they just dropped that option. But there was loads of marketing material, so people, show me this stuff and said, "Oh, have you ever seen one of those?" And no, it never existed. Oh, but there's an advert for it in Sound on Sound or E&MM or whatever. Yeah, I know there was, but they never made it. So unfortunately, good night, Torsten. By the way, just seeing you're heading out for the night. I should be closing up shop soon as well, because it's just gone 11 o'clock here, and I've been talking for a long while, which is normal, but my voice is going a little bit. So where are we? We were talking about completely lost where. Oh, there we go. Yes. So Mark says his wave state's been really stable so far. That's good to hear. Korg apparently seem to be going open source a lot. Well, that's not a bad thing. The Alesis Fusion, which I've got back there, uses a lot of open source stuff. Teensies are great for MIDI translations. Yep, I've seen that. Who is it? There's a company that does these MIDI translators, and I think that's all Teensy. And so Sasquatch says he uses a SCSI to SD version 5 in the Kurtz. Yep, well, that's what we use in the Series 3 Fairlight's the version 5. It works very, very well. The version 6, now there's a guy in America called Andre who has used the version 6 and has actually been able to set it up so that you can access the Fairlight's drives from a regular desktop computer. So you can pull sounds in and out like live, which is really useful to do. So I'm getting kind of lost here. See, this is the problem with the delay on the feed, and then all you guys talking is that I get kind of lost and you get kind of behind me. And anyway, Wagyu says, well, for example, in the Model 002, there are 2 off-the-shelf ARM boards for handling system ops and web interface ops, but they're less common than the Pi, so more of a worry. That's funny, that, because I was talking to somebody from Modal about this Korg Raspberry Pi thing, and they said that they were surprised by that because they'd been doing some tests with Raspberry Pi stuff, and they weren't getting the reliability that they would have expected or would have liked. Didn't say what Raspberry Pi boards they were looking at, and I don't know whether Modal are really pushing it or what, but it's interesting. Obviously different people get different mileage out of different things. I do like what Modal do. I'm a big fan of Modal. Philip Taysom, he's a lovely bloke. I speak to him a bit on email. He's a huge Fairlight fan, and I don't think he's got any more. I think he sold his, but he had a lovely studio as well. I think we're up to date there. So anyway, where are we in terms of stream time? I must have been going for fucking ages. 2 hours and 48 minutes. I thought I'd only do a couple of hours tonight, but hey, you guys have kept me all here, and it's all your fault. So my wife's going to have a go at me. Why are you late to bed? And I shall say it was all your fault. Thanks for the company. I've really enjoyed it again. But this is good. I mean, if we can't go out. See, this is a Wednesday, you see. Now, on a Wednesday, I used to treat myself and have a cheeky glass or 2 of wine just to celebrate getting halfway through the week. But having been recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, although very mild type 2 diabetes, I am trying my damnedest to cut down on certain things, and wine is a killer in terms of calories. So I'm going to, I've tried to cut down. So there's been no wine here, just a cold cup of tea, which is very cold now. So I would have had a glass of wine, and then it could have got really interesting. Really interesting. But no, this has been fun, and I'm enjoying doing these. I'd like to actually, have a bit of a structure, and I think that's what we're going to do with the ProSynth Network one. So in case you guys missed it, I see some of you are already saying goodbye. I'm not gone yet. So Chris and I from ProSynth Network tested this system with him dialing into me, and then we having a on-screen cam chat, and it worked really well. And the idea is that hopefully we can do a regular ProSynth Network broadcast, probably on a Sunday night after Jamie's Geosynths, because we don't want to step on his toes. But we thought, if we can maybe pull some of his audience over, that would be a good way to start at least. So we do it on a Sunday night. So Sunday's good because it's a weekend, and in the evening, or sort of like 8 o'clock, 8:30 time UK in the evening, fits well with other people around the world. I know the Australians is kind of going to be a bit in that kind of APAC region. It's not going to be brilliant. So yeah, and I've got some ideas that I'd really like to try. One of the ideas I'd like to try is something I've been meaning to do for ages, and I had kind of hoped I was doing it with someone specific, but I won't go into that. They're very busy, and it's not happened. But I would like to maybe do some stuff where we, instead of just talking about like the week's synth news, because obviously there are plenty of people that are doing that, and rather than, because I don't want to do what other people are doing, because they do it really well, so there's no point. What I'd like to do is something different. And the idea I had, and you can give me some feedback in the chat, the idea I had was that obviously, this community, there's a lot of opinion out there. So let's take, for example, the obvious one, the elephant in the room, the Behringer thing. So let's just say we've got somebody who thinks Behringer are absolutely fantastic, and another person that thinks maybe they're an entirely questionable business and maybe shouldn't be doing a lot of the things they're doing. Let's have a debate, and like make that the kind of the center of the thing. We talk about other things around that, but let's have this kind of debate, and you try and convince each other of your opinion and see if we can either find the middle ground, or maybe convince someone to, actually, Behringer are really, really good, or really, really bad. That's probably not a great example, and we won't be doing Behringer because it's just too contentious. But let's just say, for example, here's another one: programming. What's better, analog or FM? There you go. Convince me that analog synthesis is better than FM synthesis, and why? Just these kind of interesting debates that happen. Let's kind of have a very healthy, polite discussion where we try and convince each other of our points and get some input from the live audience. That was just a thought. I'm just trying to think of different ways of approaching it, but being civil and rational and reasoned, and let's not argue or create endless memes. There's one particular guy in a Behringer Facebook group that constantly makes videos in support of Behringer to the point where I actually think there may be something that might be an issue there health-wise. You know what I mean? And I think it's all right if you want to, do what you want. It's a free world, mostly. But it just kind of borders on the excessive and the outrageous. But I just thought, there's often lots of conflicting opinions, not in a bad way, but it would be nice to have a fixed kind of like a like an old debating society type thing. You know, two people have an argument. There's an audience. Each one puts their purpose across. Maybe there's a vote at the end of it. Maybe we have a vote at the beginning saying, you know, who supports this argument and who supports that one, and then go, you know, and see if we can convince other people. So let's have a look. SEO's head celebrating halfway getting through the week is so British. Yeah, don't you do it anywhere else? Hump day? No? Okay. Don't feel bad, Robbie. My little brother is 12 years old and got diagnosed. Oh, that's sad. Type 1 diabetes, that's not good. I mean, type 2, I can make a difference. Type 1, not so much. Sounds great. Debate's healthy. Sounds fun. Subtractive synthesis because you don't need to add anything to it. But he's here all week. Oh, thank you for reminding me. Wagyu has said in the chat room, yes, but you were on Yuli's creepy birthday video, wasn't I? Just that was an interesting. I got approached, right? So the Behringer marketing team, I believe, is in the Philippines, or some of them are, whether it's Music Tribe or Behringer anyway. And they approached me and they said, we'd like you to do a piece to camera for our 30th anniversary video. Would you be interested? And I'm like, okay, because I've got no real axe to grind with them, and they've been good. They've been reasonably good to me, and I genuinely think that, you know, I mean, I'm using Behringer equipment here. You know, Behringer mic, Behringer mixer, MS-101 over there. Over the years, certainly in the last 20 years or so, I've had at least one piece of Behringer equipment, and it's been useful. I've bought it for a reason, and it's performed that job. You know, I've got a UMA 25S controller with an interface built in. It's brilliant for taking around, you know, when I'm travelling around for work. Small, lightweight, battery operated, gives me a controller that I can use on my laptop, and it's an audio interface as well. So fantastic. So anyway, I said, yes, go on then, I'll do it. What do you want? And they said, well, just be you, and tell us what Behringer means to you and why it's, you know, how it's maybe benefited you over the last 30 years. And I was like, okay, I can do something. And I deliberated over and I scripted something. And in the end, I just kind of, I threw away the script and just said these things. And so I sent them the video, which wasn't very well done. It wasn't brilliantly lit, but I wasn't, you know, hadn't dressed up for the occasion. But I did it, and I didn't hear anything for ages. And then I get this message saying, it's been released. So I go and look at it, and there's this quite a long video. But, you know, the building up, you know, that build up is, you know, talking to employees and, you know, and lots of photos. And it all seems quite normal. And then there's a guy called, I forget his name now. There's two or three of us. And I was surprised. I thought it was going to be lots of people telling, you know, watchers, viewers, you know, how Behringer had been, you know, a useful thing in their life or their career or whatever. But they used just 3. And so I then kind of felt, because I thought it was going to be lots of them. So anyway, I'm the third one. And so the first 2 have been quite good. There's one guy sat in what's looking like a really nice and expensive studio. And then I come on, and there's my bit, and I'm like, I hate seeing myself and hearing myself. And I was like, cringe, you know, looking through cracks in my fingers. And then the next thing is Uli doing his thing, you know, pacing around the room, saying, you know, what he's saying. And it wasn't how I expected it to be. And I kind of knew at that point that maybe it might come and bite me on the backside. But yeah, I made a decision. I live with it. I hold my hands up. I don't regret doing it. I didn't get anything for it. No, there was no payment, whether in cash or in kind. There was nothing. So, you know, I did it completely without any kind of persuasion or influence. They just asked me and I agreed, so I did it. But I think I didn't regret it at all until that whole Peter Kern thing. And then I began to think, what have I done? What have I done? Have I aligned myself with something that I really don't want to be aligned? Because that behaviour, I'm not boycott. I'm not going to boycott Behringer. I'm not going to, if I want to boycott, I'll just stop buying their stuff. And it's as simple as that. But I did wonder, had I done something that I might kind of regret aligning myself with a company or an individual that behaved in that respect, and maybe I've lost some brownie points with some people. I don't know. Nobody's ever really mentioned it until now. Thank you. But Asiahead says he hasn't seen that. Don't bother, mate. It really, I know you're going to, but there we go. It's one of those things. We all do some things in life that we think later on that maybe we shouldn't have done, or. But yes, yeah. Wagyu says, imagine they targeted Nick Bat, we'd destroy them. Yeah, this is. I mean, if they'd attacked Sonic State as a brand, well, maybe that's a little bit more acceptable. But they actually took an individual person who'd just been critical. And when you're in business, you will get you get criticism. That's what you get. My company that I work for, I'm sure gets criticism for a number of things. We operate in the secure identity arena. So our products range from physical access control systems to tracking of individual people and assets. And a lot of people would criticize us for privacy issues. I could sit you down and tell you exactly why there's that criticism is unwarranted, but people will still do it, and we have to take that on the chin, just like any organisation has to take that criticism on the chin and present a professional front. And he doesn't like being criticised, and I'm sure that's fine. You don't have to like it. You just don't respond in that way. So that's. I think after it's all kind of settled down, I don't hate them. I don't despise them. I know some people who do, and I completely get where they're coming from. But that was I think hopefully they've learnt from that. We will see. Let's finish up with some more of the comments there. Apparently, Sasquatch says, I don't need to regret anything. Anyone who owns a Fairlight can't be bad. Well, thank you, but yeah. I think it was a faux pas, and hopefully they've learned a lesson, says Wagyu. Yep, absolutely. I hope they have too. I just did a vid. Yeah, that's true. That's all I did. I didn't, Overall, this is Wagyu saying, overall, I love what Behringer have been doing. Just targeting a single person is never good. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much the general consensus. They like to do things very, very uniquely. They like to do things. They're wanting to set their own agenda, and that obviously doesn't go down too well. That's perfectly reasonable. I get the feeling, this is Sasquatch saying, I get the feeling that Behringer thought it was funny. I can see where the humour element might have been to start with, but I think the overall execution was crass and uncalled for. I don't care who it was, whether it was Nick Bat, Peter Kern, whether I like them or I don't like them, whether I know who they are or don't know who they are, it's just not what you should be doing. You should be just saying, okay, I'll take your criticism on the chin. I'll let my products and services speak for themselves, and all the customers that clearly are very happy with what we do. And that's what you need to do. Just walk away. You learn that as you get older in life. I used to react to all sorts of things. Now I just go, okay, that's entirely your opinion. Fine. It's not going to change my life. Just walk away. Oh, listen to the almost 50-year-old man talking here. But yeah, Wagyu says, first time I saw it, I'd forgotten about Peter Kern. Yeah, I knew the name Peter Kern, but it took me a while to realise who it was. And then very quickly it kind of snowballed. But it's like, yeah, why bother? It caused a lot of ill feeling. And what it also caused, not just the ill feeling, but it caused the real fanboys, the hardcore fanboys, to get really abusive. That was the worst bit. Behringer took the video down. They issued an apology, which they took down, and that was it. They never mentioned again. But it was all those real kind of hardcore fanboys that really, that's what sickened me, and I had to figuratively bite my tongue, or bite my hands from typing numerous responses to complete idiots. So just step away, let it burn out, which I think it has done. Although we've just been talking about it. Anyway, there we go. Right, look, guys, didn't really want to end on talking about that shit, but hey, forget it. It's over and done with. I'm sure we'll probably get some comments on the video later on. I don't know. Thank you. Over 3 hours you've been sat here enduring me. But I did say it was a Q&A, and you've asked a lot of questions. Hopefully I've given you suitable answers, ones that have enlightened or educated. Maybe I've certainly learnt a couple of things. I'm going to investigate some of the things that have been mentioned in here. It's Wednesday the 25th of March, so I probably won't do anything. We'll try and going to see if we can try and do another thing on Sunday, because we can't go out anywhere here. I don't know what it's like in your part of the world, but we can't go out anywhere. So let's see if we can set something up for maybe around 8:30 on Sunday night. I don't know the exact time because I need to speak to the other guys. We're kind of doing this by the seat of our pants at the moment, but we might probably do it on this channel, the Failed Muso channel. We have spoken about setting up a ProSynth Network YouTube channel specifically for this purpose. So, but I want to get a few of these under our belt to make sure that the technology works and the audience are happy and that we're doing the right things. So if you want, keep an eye out on the ProSynth Network Facebook page. Just go and, if you're not a member, please go and have a look. I'm sure most of you guys I know from there. ProSynth Network on Facebook. If you're asked to join, you'll be asked a few very simple, mostly tongue-in-cheek questions, mainly to prove that you're human, and that you are genuine, people that are interested in synthesizers and shit. And then you agree to the rules, and that's the most important thing, because they're just basic rules, but they're common decency rules. So just agree to that, and then come and join us there. And there's some really cool people that hang out there, from nobodies like myself to people like Hans Zimmer is a member there, and a number of other very well known and esteemed members who do chip in. They don't just sit there watching, they do actually chip in. So it's a really cool thing. So yeah, we'll hopefully reconvene on Sunday, and this time we'll hopefully get Ben Simpson, who's the guy behind ProSynth Network, the actual owner of it all. So we'll hopefully get him involved. He's had good warning not to get blind drunk beforehand. So hopefully Chris will be around as well, the three of us, and we'll do that. No, Asio Head, one of the questions is not do you prefer cats or dogs, because we all know that synthesizer people prefer cats. It's an obvious answer, isn't it? Before I go, I've got to... I'm so excited because I had cats, and unfortunately they both passed away with illnesses in the last couple of years. And we've just got to the point now where we can actually think about having some new ones. And they're very young. They're not here yet. We're just waiting until they're the right weight to have their immunisations, and then we go and pick them up. But look. That's one of them. That's the little girl, and then there's a little boy. Look, look. So they're going to be the new synth cats over here soon, hopefully. Fingers crossed. So anyway, there we go. So look, thanks ever so much to all of you that are left in the chat room, to Asio Head, Wagyu, Sasquatch, who've all been here, like a Native VS. We've got Mark Barnes in here, although I think he might have gone. We've had Torsten and Native VS. I recognise that name from the Sonic State. So it's all coming back to me. James as well, James Bennett, JPP Age 2, and everyone else that's been in here. Thanks ever so much for joining. And I hope you enjoyed it, whiled away some of your quarantined hours. And hopefully let's try and do this again on Sunday, whatever the date of Sunday might be. Was it 29th? Sunday the 29th. Oh, and I'll be 1 hour less because our clocks go forward on that weekend. Anyway, there we go. Thanks ever so much for joining, and take great care, and we'll see you soon. All right, bye. Thanks ever so much for joining, and take great care, and we'll see you soon. All right.